Chapter 764. The Song of the Sun and the voice were the final melody in Su Ming's mind. His world swiftly shattered as his body sank, turning into fragments that swept up everything about him. It was as if a ball of fire had been lit up out of nowhere and burned everything around him. Perhaps this was not a dream. Perhaps this was another form of reality. The goal of Tion's art was to make Su Ming sink into oblivion, just like how he had done so many times before, to sink into oblivion so that he could go through the next cycle. Besides him, no one knew the goal of his plan. Even if many of the immortal sects had joined in and carried out this plan that had been set up since ancient times, they could only make guesses. No one could see through Tion's thoughts. Perhaps Tion was not talking about wiping out his life, but about wiping out his memories. However, this time, Su Ming had surpassed Tion's control, and he was truly under his control. At the instant Su Ming opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a gigantic ink-death vortex that covered the entire sky. The second thing he saw was the curved edges of the gigantic cultivation planets, and the sky that was swiftly being covered by a blue cloth. The third thing he saw was the galaxy formed by Tion's divine ability. The gigantic face formed by the stars was filled with disbelief and shock as it met Su Ming's gaze. The fourth thing Su Ming saw was the black-robed Tion burning his magical body in the distance. At that moment, only his head remained. This was the first time Su Ming saw shock on Tion's magical body's face. That shock was real, and the shock was real. The disbelief on the face of the black-robed Tion's magical body was also real. Su Ming had woken up. This is impossible. For the first time ever, Tion, who only had his head left, lost his dignity, lost control over his mind, and let out a roar of disbelief. Veins popped up on his face. Clearly, at that moment, his excitement had reached a monstrous level. He could not believe what he was seeing. This overturned everything he knew and crushed his confidence. It's impossible for you to wake up. This is the art of oblivion I executed by burning my magical body. This is an art you can't fight against. You can't fight against. You should sink into oblivion just like you did in the past and start the cycle of your life over and over again. Without end, this is your destiny. This is the destiny that I have bestowed upon you. How did you wake up so quickly? Your life is mine. Everything about you must be done according to my will. Tion went berserk. His hoarse voice reverberated in the surroundings. At this moment, he raised his head and roared at the sky in a hysterical manner. It was you who interfered with my spell. It was you who woke me up. It was you. Who are you? Who the hell are you? Tion's voice boomed in the air. Compared to him, Su Ming's expression was slightly complicated at that moment, but it was mostly calm. I finally understand everything, Su Ming mumbled. He, too, lifted his head and looked at the sky. At that moment, the face of the star in the sky was already distorted, as if it was also roaring. A long time ago, an enchanted warship flew out from true sacred world. It was the spirits of 9 Yin's enchanted vessel. With sacred world's will, they searched for all the corpses of the powerful warriors who had died in the endless galaxies of the 4 great true worlds. Then, one day, the spirits of 9 Yin found the corpse of a baby. They believed that this corpse fulfilled their requirements and sealed it in their enchanted warship. Another number of years passed. The spirits of 9 Yin's enchanted vessel broke down due to an accident in true Morning Dao world, and it rushed into a place called Death Region. That place is where the berserkers are, and because of the spirits of 9 Yin's enchanted vessel, the world of 9 Yin was formed. The first god of berserkers went there, and so did the second and third. Perhaps the second god of berserkers brought a baby with him when he left the world of 9 Yin. Perhaps searching for this baby was the first order, but no matter what, the second god of berserkers brought this baby back to Great Yu's palace and treated him as his own child, together with his daughter. This is a dead baby because he was originally a corpse. Su Ming mumbled softly. There was no anguish in his voice, only understanding. Not long after the second god of berserkers brought the baby's corpse back, due to the first departure, because the berserkers were no longer as strong as they were in the past, because the immortals were wary of the berserkers' growth, and because of that, the immortals launched a war against the berserkers. The immortals won that war. They killed the second god of berserkers and tore his body apart. During that war, the land of the berserkers shattered and was split into several parts. During that war, Great U Palace was frozen, and Great U Imperial City disappeared from the land of the berserkers. During that war, the dead baby's corpse and the second god of berserkers' daughter were taken away by Dtion and brought to the land of the immortals. They discovered the strangeness of the dead baby. Perhaps it was due to the second god of berserkers' daughter coming into contact with the dead baby, which caused the baby to also possess some sort of strangeness. From then on, the siblings were reduced to puppets. The dead baby was sealed in a certain region in the land of the immortals, and his sister was taken away by Dao Chun. At that time, Dtion, you might have found a way to make yourself infinitely stronger from the dead baby, and from then on, you executed the plan you spoke of since ancient times with the dead baby. Perhaps this dead baby is not truly dead. Perhaps its death in the land of Bright Yang means that it can be reborn in the land of Death. I don't know what you discovered, but this discovery led you to carry out a plan. The process of this plan is to make this dead baby sink into oblivion again and again until he sinks into Death land. As he sank into the seal, you created a memory for the baby, a memory called Dark Mountain. With that memory as the foundation, you executed the repetitive process of sinking into oblivion. Because a memory is like a picture. Only by drawing it would you be able to make the baby sink into oblivion and be unable to walk out. I don't know how many times he sank into oblivion, but I do know that when I woke up in Dark Mountain and obtained a fragment from Xiao Hong, became different from before. This is reincarnation. This is destiny. This is me. Su Ming averted his gaze from the stars in the sky and looked at Dtion, who was practically in a hysterical state, calmly. There was a person, perhaps a wisp of his soul, who fused into your plan the first time you executed it. He quietly changed me and wanted to wake me up. He wanted me to open my true eyes and see the world beyond the well. I already have an answer in my heart as to who this person is, Su Ming said softly. Dtion's breathing quickened. He only had his head left, and as it burned, his eyes became bloodshot and filled with madness. He glared at Su Ming, and for the first time, greed appeared in his eyes, along with Dtion's true emotions. That greed made it seem as if he wanted to devour Su Ming in one gulp and obtain everything about him. You are destiny. Your life is my plan. Even if you understand a lot, so what? You're still in Death region. You're still sinking into oblivion. Even if you wake up, you'll still be sinking into oblivion. At the same time, madness appeared in Dtion's eyes. Stars shone in them. Suddenly, as the light in his eyes grew to a piercing degree, dazzling starlight also erupted from the eyes of the roaring face of the stars in the sky. 1,000 years of destiny, 1,000 years of sinking into oblivion. You sink into oblivion once more. As Dtion roared, the face in the sky also roared. All the starlight gathered on Su Ming at that instant, as if Dtion was unwilling to accept his failure and wanted to try again. It's useless. Su Ming sighed and shook his head. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the area before him with his index finger. This is a dot, Su Ming said softly, and a crystalline dot appeared where his index finger was. Start drawing from the left and draw a circle. When you stop drawing, the end point will also be here. Su Ming's right index finger started drawing a circle from the left. The spot where the circle was completed was the starting point and also the end point. It was the fusion point. This is reincarnation. Then even if I start drawing from the right and start from the end point, I'll draw a circle in reverse. As Su Ming spoke, he started drawing a circle from the end point with his right index finger. The spot where the circle was completed was still the same dot. This is also reincarnation. As Su Ming finished speaking, An indescribable presence appeared around his body. That presence was not that of a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. Instead, it was a presence that surpassed the berserker soul realm. That presence grew thicker and filled Su Ming's body, causing the galaxy to collapse with a bang at the instant it came into contact with him. It was as if the place where Su Ming stood was a forbidden zone for starlight. His hair danced in the air, his eyes were calm, and his words seemed to contain an endless amount of wisdom as they reverberated in the world. Reincarnation is a point. This point is Berserker's Realm Mountain. This point is the starting point and also the end point. From this point, we can move towards the future, and we can also move into the past. This point is also the mirror's point. The front side of the mirror is the normal world. It is the past moving towards the future, and the world in the mirror is the opposite. It is the opposite of life and death, the past and the future. It is just like the epiphany I gained in Hidden Dragon Sect. It is just like the process of winter moving towards spring, because the world in the mirror is the people moving from the future to the past. The immortals are the front side of the mirror. They are the world outside the mirror, and they move from life to death. The Berserker's Death region is the world in the mirror, and they move from death to life. The presence that surpassed those who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm erupted from Su Ming's body at that instant. It filled his body, causing him to look like a god in the world. You. Even greater shock appeared on Di Tian's face. At that moment, the Su Ming in his eyes was so terrifying that his heart trembled. What was terrifying was not his level of cultivation, but his epiphany. I originally didn't quite understand something, but the experience just now allowed me to understand everything, Su Ming said softly. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 765. What I don't understand is that if the front side of the mirror represents walking from life to death, then the back side of the mirror is naturally the opposite, walking from death to life. Then my reincarnations, the depravity you spoke of, and the art you used just now, those things that were real yet illusory, what are they? Su Ming asked faintly. He looked at Di Tian, but there was no question in his words. Instead, he had his own answer. Only at this moment did I finally understand that the front side and the back side of the mirror are not a complete cycle of life and death. Su Ming shook his head, feeling slightly sentimental in his heart. It's just like the existence of yin and yang. People only see these two sides, and they forget that there's still one more point. The world outside the mirror is the land of immortals, and the world within the mirror is the land of berserkers. In truth, there's also a mirror within a mirror. If two mirrors are placed facing each other, then the endless darkness will be the mirror within the mirror. That is the place where you made me sink into depravity, and it is also the point and world of the cycle of life and death. That is also the place the Elder kept telling me about, Berserker's Realm Mountain. When I jumped into Berserker's Realm Mountain, I didn't die but found that point. When I walked out of that point, I walked from the world within the mirror into the mirror. Right now, I truly exist in the mirror, and my next step is to move from death to life, from the mirror to the world outside the mirror, from death to bright yang, from the land of berserkers to the land of immortals. At the instant Su Ming finished speaking, the presence that surpassed that of a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm swiftly increased exponentially. That presence shook the sky and earth, causing the entire world to be filled with excitement because of Su Ming. It caused the face of the stars in the sky to distort at that instant. When Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung his arm, it shattered with a bang, revealing the blue sky. That was the art the old Sun Maker had used to stop the cultivation planets from descending. Su Ming's hair moved without wind. The quality of his cultivation base went through a drastic change at that moment. This change caused the presence spreading out from his body to turn into a mighty pressure. That pressure spread out from his body and instantly enveloped the land, the entire sky, and the entire land of berserkers. The land of berserkers trembled. All the mountains on the land trembled. All the rivers stopped flowing, and all the ferocious beasts lifted their heads and roared at the sky. Even the ferocious beasts who were fighting against each other stopped fighting at that moment. They lifted their heads and roared, and the entire land of berserkers responded to them. Huge waves rose in the Dead Sea, stirring up waves that surged into the sky. It was as if the entire Dead Sea was boiling. The rumbling sounds from the waves shook the sky and earth, and it was as if the entire berserkers had risen to power. The roars that erupted from South Morning, Eastern Wastelands, Alliance of the Western Region, and Northern Province caused the entire land of berserkers to have a soul that could gather them together during the split-up. This was a berserker's soul. During that instant, Shueisha from the great tribe of Surging Clouds and the near 10,000 tribesmen behind him felt their blood boil to its limit. Their breathing quickened, and a presence that they could not suppress erupted from their bodies. The tens of thousands of immortals below shuddered under that mighty pressure, and all of them knelt down against their will. This was not their will, but the will in the world at that moment told them that if they did not kneel down, then they would immediately be crushed by the pressure of the world. Jin's face turned pale. All of this had already surpassed his expectations. In fact, even the immortals might not have expected that the appearance of Eastern Wasteland's tower would cause the situation to deteriorate to this extent. Su Ming's presence rose madly. The change in his cultivation base caused him to turn into the most brilliant light in the world. At that instant, streams of light swiftly gathered around him, distorting in the air. Right before Su Ming, the streams of light that had appeared out of nowhere gathered together and turned into a gigantic statue. Su Ming recognized this statue. In fact, some of the berserkers had seen this statue before. This statue was the deity statue of awakening. This was the deity statue that would appear in all the berserkers whose blood veins had reached a certain level when they awakened. This was the deity statue of awakening personally created by the first god of berserkers, and it was worshipped by all the berserkers so that they could obtain the power of awakening. At that moment, the deity statue looked exactly the same as in Su Ming's memories. Once it appeared, a strange light appeared in its eyes, and as if it had been revived, it stared at Su Ming, wrapped its fist in its palm, and bowed swiftly towards him. This was the deity statue of awakening worshipping, the deity statue of awakening showing respect. Almost at the instant the deity statue of awakening bowed towards Su Ming, the sky rumbled, and more streams of light erupted madly from the air. Before Su Ming, right above the deity statue of awakening, another gigantic statue gathered together. It was the deity statue of bone sacrifice. In the hearts of the berserkers, the deity statue of bone sacrifice was an incomparably noble existence. Every single time it appeared, it meant that there was a person with incredible potential who had obtained great use acknowledgement and was conferred the title of Divine General of Bone Sacrifice. It was a supreme glory. Every single time a Divine General of Bone Sacrifice appeared, most of the people who saw it would worship it. Yet now, once the deity statue of bone sacrifice appeared, it lowered its head towards Su Ming, just like the deity statue of awakening, and with respect, wrapped its fist in its palm and bowed towards him. That one bow made the sky roar. That one bow made the entire world seem as if it was trembling. Once it bowed, all the streams of light in the world instantly gathered above the deity statue of bone sacrifice. As a brilliant ray of light swept through the sky like flowing water, an even larger and stronger deity statue appeared in the sky with a bang. That's the deity statue of Berserker Soul. It's the deity statue of Berserker Soul that has appeared the least. In fact, it's rarely seen even once over the course of countless years. Uproars instantly rose into the air. The deity statue of Berserker Soul stood tall in the sky, and just like the deity statue of Bone Sacrifice and the deity statue of Awakening, it lowered its head towards Su Ming and wrapped its fist in its palm before bowing towards him respectfully, as if it was submitting to him. The appearance of the three deity statues and their worship caused Su Ming's qi to erupt forth with a bang. At that moment, he had far surpassed the great completion of the Berserker Soul Realm, and his qi was still rising non-stop. A terrifying, mighty pressure spread out from his body, and the previously crumbling statue of the god of Berserkers behind him gradually manifested once again. All of this caused a dazed look to appear on Di Tian's face, along with a crazed look of struggle. The three Berserkers bowing together. This is the legendary life cultivation. This is the presence of life cultivation. This is the presence of life cultivation that has appeared once again in the land of Berserkers since ancient times. Shui Sha, the thin old man from the great tribe of surging clouds, was so excited that he could not control his emotions. He looked at Su Ming with a trembling body, and the burning passion and respect in his eyes instantly reached its peak. This is the day the Berserkers rise to power. I, Shui Sha, am willing to follow behind the god of Berserkers and live and die with the Berserkers. I will blast open the path to the land of immortals for the god of Berserkers. Shui Sha had gone mad. This was a madness born from his excitement. He swiftly knelt down before Su Ming, and as his entire body trembled, he swore the oath of the Berserkers. From now on, I will offer my soul to the Berserkers, my body to the Berserkers, my flesh and blood to open the sky for the Berserkers, and the power of my blood to make the Berserkers rise to power. Shui Sha's voice echoed in the air, bringing with it his excitement, the excitement of his old heart waking up once again, and the tears of excitement that fell from his eyes at that moment. He loved the Berserkers, loved his own people deeply, but only at this moment did he no longer need to suppress his love. Only then did he no longer need to fall into despair. Only then could he release his love and explode forth in a grand manner. Behind him, the near 10,000 people from the great tribe of surging clouds knelt down simultaneously and shouted the same oath of the Berserkers as Shui Sha. At the same time, Tianqi from all entities clan knelt down in excitement and knelt down. Along with the near 10,000 people from the 12 tribes behind him, they swore the oath of the Berserkers and offered everything they had to their people. It was also at this moment that an endless amount of long arcs charged forth from several other directions in the world. They were charging forward madly at a speed that had already surpassed the limits of what they could do. This was madness that came from people who did not care about anything else. I, Qi Tian, greet the god of Berserkers. I offer my soul to the Berserkers, my body to the Berserkers, my flesh and blood to open the sky for the Berserkers, and the power of my blood to make the Berserkers rise to power. That was Qi Tian's voice, and behind the old man whose entire body was filled with lightning sparks, the 10,000-something people from his tribe let out shocking roars and oaths at the same time. I, Manya, elder of Berserker Fong tribe, greet the god of Berserkers. From now on, I will offer my soul, body, and flesh to the Berserkers, and with the power of my blood, I will give up everything for the Berserkers. For the Berserkers to rise to power, I will not regret, even if my soul is destroyed. There was a hint of unrest in that ancient voice. It was the oath shouted out by the 10,000 people from Berserker Fong tribe as they charged forward at full speed. I, Wu Shuang, elder of Golden Mountain tribe, bring 10,000 people from my tribe to greet the god of Berserkers. For the Berserkers to rise to power, Golden Mountain tribe is willing to become the vanguard of the god of Berserkers. For the god of Berserkers and for the Berserkers, we will trample on everything in the world. The tribe hidden in the mountain range also arrived with a bang at that moment. Their appearance and kneeling down together made it seem as if Su Ming was the only one left in the world as his presence continued erupting forth. Su Ming's hair danced in the air. His expression was calm, and familiar voices reached his ears one after another. I am a cultivator of the fated kin. Greetings, respected Senior MO. I'm a cultivator of the fated kin, Nangong Hen. Greetings, respected Senior MO. At that moment, the scattered people who had come from all directions let out a roar that sounded as if the sky and earth were rumbling. There was excitement in those voices, as if they were roars that made their blood boil. The fated kin had arrived. Su Ming stood in midair and swept his calm gaze past all the people who were kneeling down around him. He looked at Di Tian, whose face was pale and whose head had only a small part of it left burning. Su Ming saw the unwillingness to admit defeat and madness in Di Tian's eyes, along with a deep bewilderment. Reincarnation is a point. This point is Berserker's Realm Mountain, and it is also this place. Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the ground. With it, the ground swiftly shattered, and a blood crystal that had been buried in the depths of the ground for an unknown number of years turned into a blood arc with an ancient air and charged toward Su Ming. Right after that blood crystal, more blood crystals flew out with a bang from the ground. They turned into long arcs that charged towards Su Ming and swiftly fused with his body. Each time they did so, Su Ming's cultivation base would erupt madly, and the mighty pressure on his body would increase by several-fold in a terrifying manner. From now onwards, I will cultivate life cultivation, Su Ming stated flatly. There was a form of determination and determination in his eyes. During that instant, he also sensed the frozen Great Yu Imperial City. I'm not going to roll around this time. After all, I'm too skinny, and my bones are uncomfortable. This time, I've prepared grass knot dolls to make little people. My fellow devils, ahem, please give me your votes. I'll also give this doll to Under the Moon. I wish her and him a happy birthday. Don't worry, this doll is filled with blessings. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 766. The blood crystals swiftly fused into Su Ming's body, and with each blood crystal he fused with, his level of cultivation would increase exponentially. His presence stirred up the world and the universe, and an indescribable, awe-inspiring might was born faintly in his eyes. That awe-inspiring might was the supreme presence in the universe and the earth. It also meant that the berserkers had been suppressing themselves for countless years, and now they were bursting forth in a frenzy. Su Ming did not calculate just how many blood crystals he had. He did not need to, because he no longer cared. It did not matter how many times, be it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, or even more. To him, it no longer mattered. What was important was that he had walked out of the cycle of reincarnation in the mirror within the mirror. And more importantly, he knew clearly that he was no longer in the cycle of reincarnation, because he was no longer in the mirror within the mirror. Because with that leap from Berserker's Realm Mountain, he had found that point and had completely stepped out of it. He knew that he was real, and he was the only one. That was why the number of reincarnations he had gone through was no longer important to Su Ming. Once Su Ming understood all of this, and all the blood crystals fused into his body, the power that erupted from his body completely surpassed those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm with a bang. The seal in his mind also completely shattered at that instant. As the seal on his memory shattered, and a large amount of memories surged into Su Ming's divine sense like a tidal wave, he saw a world. That world was dark and it was lonely. He heard the voice of the second god of Berserker's daughter once again. She was his little sister, and each time she called out to him, sharp stabs of pain would appear in Su Ming's heart. He did not have many memories, and they were very short, but in those short memories, he sensed a powerful calling coming from beyond Death region in the galaxy belonging to the immortals. That calling did not come from his little sister, but from his soul, as if it was a call that came from one with him. There might only be one incredibly strong call, but there were millions or even an endless number of them calling out to him. Those weak calls gave Su Ming a strange feeling. It was as if all the cultivators in the land of immortals had something that originally belonged to Su Ming, which was why he felt as if the endless number of immortals were calling out to him at that moment. As they called out to him, Su-Ming took the most crucial step after attaining great completion in the Berserker Soul realm with a bang in the world of Berserkers. Once he took that step, he would enter life cultivation. The four realms of life cultivation were life matrix, life privation, life palace, and world of life. Knowing what life was, knowing his own life matrix, understanding the changes in the world, understanding the changes in his own life. My destiny is to move from death to life. My destiny is to move from winter to spring. My destiny is not to kowtow to the heavens to fulfill my destiny, but to have the heavens kowtow to me, to use my will of death to die my life. Su-Ming said languidly. At the instant he said these words, the fragment of the power of the one world he had received from the Candle Dragon's blessing when he was in the world of Nine all those years ago immediately started melting in Su-Ming's heart. As it melted, Su-Ming's eyes looked like stars. His presence changed completely at that instant, as if his body and mind were going through a metamorphosis, an evolution. The entire land of Berserkers roared, and the previously crumbled statue of the god of Berserkers gathered together once again behind him. The 10,000 feet tall statue of the god of Berserkers gained corporeal form until it looked like real flesh and blood appeared in the world. All the Berserkers who came here let out cheers as they knelt down and worshipped it. That voice spread in all directions and shook all the immortals who heard it. There was madness contained within that voice, along with a suppressed outburst, and it contained the soul of a berserker. As that voice spread out, the Dead Sea in the land of Berserkers started tumbling even more violently. The entire sea looked as if it was about to surge into the sky. As the endless waves roared madly, the numerous sea creatures in the sea shuddered and avoided it. At the same time, when the Dead Sea's roars reached their most intense state, the seawater started tumbling backwards in all directions, as if some gigantic creature was about to rise from the Dead Sea. As the seawater tumbled backwards, a vortex that was several hundreds of thousands of leagues big appeared on the surface of the Dead Sea. That vortex rotated with loud booming sounds, and wisps of freezing air spread out from within, causing the world of Berserkers to instantly become much colder. Almost at the same time the drastic change occurred in the Dead Sea, the immortals' rune to descend in the sky above Su-Ming let out a shocking roar behind the blue curtain. Light also started flashing rapidly. Clearly, more immortals were about to descend in this place. By the looks of the two runes rotating, there might be an incredibly large number of immortals descending this time. Su-Ming turned around slowly and looked at the statue of himself that had appeared behind him. As he looked at it, he lifted his right hand and pointed at it. From now on, my statue of the god of Berserkers will be the deity statue of life for all Berserkers who have broken through the Berserker Soul realm. From now on, all Berserkers will break through the limit of the Berserker Soul realm and will be able to understand my life cultivation realm. Su-Ming's words were law, and he stirred up the entire Berserker's kismet. As his voice reverberated in the air, a light that surged into the sky instantly spread out from his statue of the god of Berserkers. The presence of life cultivation realm was contained within his statue. According to the legends of the Berserkers since ancient times, the moment the god of Berserkers appeared once more, all the Berserkers would no longer be limited to the Berserker Soul realm. When the god of Berserkers gathered together the deity statue of Berserkers in the new realm, all the Berserkers would go through a breakthrough. The cultivation bases of all the Berserkers in the area immediately rose at that instant. As their blood burned, even the Berserkers who were no longer in the area had their cultivation bases increase exponentially. It was especially so for the powerful Berserkers who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm for a long time. During that instant, they sensed the hint of life cultivation realm from the deity statue of life cultivation realm as their cultivation bases boiled. Before long, they would be able to rely on their own blood and epiphany to have a certain chance of taking that step forward and stepping in a life cultivation realm. Just like Su Ming, this was the true hope and sign of the Berserker's rise to power. God of Berserkers! God of Berserkers! God of Berserkers! The roars from the Berserkers reverberated in the air with an even more shocking intensity, turning into the only sound in the area. Under those voices, and in the midst of reverence and worship, Su Ming turned his head around and looked at Di Tian, who only had a small part of his head left from the flames. Your art of reincarnation is much, much weaker compared to the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world. If he were to be precise, the principle behind the mirror within the mirror Di Tian had placed on Su Ming's body was the same as the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world. However, Su Ming had been able to retain his consciousness even through the countless cycles of reincarnation in the undying and imperishable world. He had managed to refine a powerful will, and he could gain an epiphany and step out of it. Compared to this, Di Tian's art was simply not worth mentioning. He had sunk into oblivion and returned to Dark Mountain after hundreds of years. In truth, if Su Ming did not want to, he would not have gone back. He had returned to that state of oblivion because he wanted to find that point. There was a complicated look on Di Tian's sullen face, along with a shock that would not disappear. All of this had surpassed his expectations, causing him to be unable to change anything. At that moment, he knew that he had truly lost control over Su Ming. He knew that from now on, Su Ming would no longer have any connection with him. He could no longer control his reincarnation. What awaited him was not only the questioning from the immortal sects due to this plan, but more importantly, he would also have to face Su Ming's slaughter once he rushed out of the land of Berserkers. Su Ming might not be strong to his real self, but his growth and comprehensive abilities, especially when he remembered the omens of the abyss, remembered the disaster spoken in the legends of the immortals, and remembered the benefits the corpse in the land of immortals had brought to the entire immortal race. Almost everyone, including him, had obtained cultivation thanks to those benefits. If any accident happened, then it would be another disaster for the immortals. Suddenly, a crazy idea sprouted in his mind. I absolutely cannot let him leave the land of Berserkers. Almost at the instant this thought appeared in Di Tian's mind, a strange light appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He could clearly sense that ever since he stepped into life cultivation realm, a faint connection had formed between him and Great Yu Imperial City, which was located at the bottom of the Dead Sea. That connection was becoming more tangible with each passing moment. He took a step towards Di Tian. At the instant his foot landed, blood capillaries filled Di Tian's eyes, and a small part of his head instantly exploded with a bang. With the power from the explosion, he let out a shrill roar. Destiny's heavenly punishment, light from the 9 stars, traceless starshine. Di Tian exploded, and as his roar reverberated in the air, an illusion instantly appeared at the spot where his head had exploded. That illusion looked like a surface of water, and there were 9 cultivation planets reflected on the surface of the water. Within that illusion, the 9 cultivation planets shone with powerful rays of light, and they shot through the illusionary surface of the water to charge towards Su Ming. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. At the instant he took a step forward, his body was pierced by an endless amount of powerful light. However, those powerful lights only passed through him and could not affect him in the slightest. When his foot landed, he appeared in the illusionary 9 stars on the surface of the water. Curse with my life matrix. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pushed his palm down on the surface of the water. At the instant his palm landed, the surface of the water immediately looked as if ink had been poured into it. It was swiftly dyed black, and a rotten stench surrounded the surface of the water, causing black smoke to immediately rise from it. At the instant it disappeared around Su Ming, a shrill, muffled groan came from the air. That was Su Ming's curse. Even if Di Tian's magical body had crumbled, the curse was still chasing after his life to head towards where his real body was and start rotting away. When Di Tian crumbled and Su Ming's curse chased after his real body, the blue cloth in the sky disappeared. As it rippled, it seemed to have turned into an old face. The sound of a sun reverberated in the air. That face cast Su Ming a glance from the sky, and a kind smile appeared on his face. "I'll be waiting for you in Berserker's Realm Mountain." The blue cloth disappeared, and the sky returned to the form of a vortex. The cultivation planets that had descended previously had also disappeared without a trace. However, the Immortal's rune to descend in the sky was shining brilliantly at that moment, and one by one, they appeared. 10, 100, 1,000, nearly 10,000 figures appeared with a bang. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 767. That was not close to 10,000, but tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of immortals descending at the same time was an incredibly rare sight in the past. Besides the immortals invading Great U Imperial City en masse all those years ago, something similar had never happened again. This was because descending in such a large scale within such a short period of time would use up too many of the immortals' resources, but that was not the main point. The main point was that the immortals would need to bring out what little power they had left from True Morning Dao World. The power of True Morning Dao World was the strongest power in True Morning Dao World. This power was given to them by True Morning Dao World, and even the immortals had very little of it left. After all, it had been a long, long time since True Morning Dao World had performed any miracles. Aside from using up Morning Dao's power, the cultivators were also required to sacrifice their own life to suppress the laws in Death region. The sacrifice of their life was incredibly great, and it was not something that dozens or even thousands of people could bear. It required nearly 100 times the number of people who descended to Death region to sacrifice their lives at the same time. It could not be reversed or recovered. There were other conditions as well. In fact, they would need to use some of the immortal supreme treasures to accomplish this, and they could not take too long either. It was just like how the 1 million immortals had descended in the land of berserkers in the past. At that time, while the immortals had won, if they included the price they had paid, it was a Pyrrhic victory, and the immortals had been in a state of recovery for many years after that. This time, only tens of thousands of immortals had descended, which was far inferior to the war in the past. The price the immortals had to pay was not too high, but in the end, they still had to pay quite a large price. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He could sense that the connection between him and Great U Imperial City in the Dead Sea in the land of berserkers seemed to have become stronger. He first cast a cold glance at Jian, then swept his gaze across the land. The tens of thousands of immortals on the ground were all intimidated by him, and all of them lowered their heads under his gaze. Almost at the instant they lowered their heads, Su Ming's cold voice echoed in the sky. "Berserkers, hear me. Kill all immortals who resist." The instant Su Ming's voice traveled outwards, the 60,000 berserkers who had just arrived instantly started roaring. "Kill!" Their murderous roars shook the sky and earth at that instant, and the tens of thousands of figures charged towards the descending immortals with loud whistles. Su Ming took a step forward and disappeared in an instant. He appeared right in front of the crowd and charged towards the rune that was descending. When he lifted his right hand, he struck the rune in the sky. Shockingly, he wasn't here to kill, but to destroy this formation. With Su Ming's previous level of cultivation, he would not have been able to destroy this rune. However, now that he had stepped into life cultivation realm and possessed incredible combat abilities, he possessed the right to destroy it. Almost at the instant Su Ming tried to shake the rune, Jian's expression changed. As he hesitated and struggled, Su Ming's eldest senior brother, Xinggan, picked up the gigantic battle axe and looked over with a cold gaze. At the same time, the sounds of battle erupted from tens of thousands of people. The immortals who had descended were clearly prepared for this. Right at that moment, before their bodies could materialize, an invisible hand crushed some sort of object beside them, and in an instant, they completed the process of materializing. They revealed themselves and began fighting against the berserkers. passed down the orders of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. The berserkers have caused chaos. Slaughter all the berserkers in eastern wastelands and south mourning to serve as a warning to others. An oppressive voice came from the vortex rune, and hundreds of people walked out from the countless figures that had descended. All of them had the cultivation bases of ascendant cultivators. Not all of them were at the great circle of ascendant, but the deterrence brought about by the hundreds of ascendant cultivators was extremely strong. Almost at the same time that voice echoed in the air, a violent bang rang out. It was Su Ming ramming his fist against the rune in the sky. A wave of ripples spread out, and the rune instantly started swaying. That bang lifted the curtains for the great battle. The sounds of battle surged into the sky and spread out. The tens of thousands of immortals and berserkers fought against each other, causing the sky to look as if it was raining blood. That blood spilled on the ground, and corpses fell to the ground. Pieces of torn flesh scattered everywhere, causing the tens of thousands of immortals on the ground to stare at the sky and Su Ming as they trembled. No one knew who it was that let out a low growl, but he swiftly flew up with a ferocious look on his face, intending to join the battle. Yet before he could even fly 100 feet into the air, his entire body shuddered, and as if he had crashed into an invisible barrier, his body exploded and turned into flesh and blood. This brutal sight immediately caused the other immortals on the ground who had also wanted to rush out to stop in fear. At some unknown point of time, a barrier had been placed 100 feet above them. That barrier could be entered from the outside, but no one from the inside could rush out. It was like a cage. Su Ming was the one who had placed that barrier. He had his own reasons for not killing the tens of thousands of immortals who had been intimidated. The battle in the sky became even more intense. Su Ming lifted his right hand and hurled a punch forward once again. Destructive ripples spread out from his body and swept out in all directions. At the same time his punch crashed into the rune, it also crushed all the immortals who wanted to get closer to him. Immortal's rune. A murderous glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. During that instant, a large amount of black aura of death spread out from his body. That black aura surrounded his body, causing him to look as if he was filled with an evil and ghastly air. He lifted his right hand and hurled another punch forward. At the instant he did so, the Immortal's rune let out a loud bang that shook the entire area. As it rumbled, an endless amount of cracks appeared on the rune, and they continued spreading out until they covered the entire area. Yet almost at the same time they started shattering, those cracks instantly closed up, and waves of vast, bright yang aura spread out, causing the rune to look as if it was surrounded by golden light, as if it could not be destroyed. At the same time, long arcs charged out from all directions in the Immortals galaxy towards the region where the countless continents were located. There were hundreds of thousands of Immortals in that region at that moment. There was an incredibly gigantic rune on one of the floating continents. At that moment, there were thousands of people sitting cross-legged and guarding it. There were also 3 old men with great levels of cultivation sitting at the center of the rune. Every single time they were relocated, these thousands of people would immediately age. In fact, some of them would even turn into ashes, but another batch of thousands of people would immediately take their place. They would use their life force to maintain the rune and continuously relocate immortals into the land of berserkers. As Su Ming's voice rumbled in the land of berserkers, the rune in the land shone. Even if cracks appeared under that light and the thousands of people suppressing them, they instantly recovered. As the rune was activated and guarded, more immortals in the area swiftly stepped into it and were swiftly relocated to descend. Shatter. Su Ming's low roar seemed to be able to tear through space as he stood in the land of berserker sky. He charged out like a black shooting star, and the moment his body crashed into the rune, it started trembling violently with a bang. But it did not crumble. Su Ming threw his head back and roared. With one leap, he slaughtered his way into the Immortals' crowd. Wherever he went, none of the Immortals could stand up to him. From the distance, the trail of blood Su Ming left behind looked like a blood dragon, and Su Ming was the dragon's head that caused more and more blood to flow out of it. Once he swept through the area, Su Ming brought the blood of the people he killed to surround him. At the instant it turned into a blood dragon, he charged straight into the death vortex in the sky. With the fresh blood of these immortals, I will summon all of you from death fog, and let me sense your presence. Are you willing to appear and borrow my aura of death to destroy the immortals' rune? Su Ming stopped outside death vortex in the sky, but the blood around him was swept up and charged into the vortex. Muffled, excited roars immediately came from within the vortex. Black aquatic dragons revealed their bodies and sucked in a deep breath towards the blood. At the same time, more strange beasts manifested from the fog and started devouring the blood in a frenzy. At the instant Su Ming became a life cultivator, not only did he sense the endless calls from the immortals, he also sensed an innumerable amount of ferocious spirits in the fog in death vortex between the land of berserkers and the land of immortals. These ferocious spirits were formed by the aura of death, and they were the source and destination of all death in the land of berserkers. Dark light appeared in the eyes of these ferocious spirits once they devoured the immortals' blood, and all of them rushed out of death fog to charge towards Su Ming. There were a large number of aquatic dragons among these ferocious spirits, and all of them had strange bodies. However, no matter what they looked like, when they flew out, they turned into wisps of black aura that surrounded Su Ming when they closed in on him. Instantly, black aura spread out to several tens of thousands of feet around him. Immortals rune to descend on us, shatter. Su Ming took a step forward and closed in on the immortals rune. He lifted his right hand and hurled a punch towards the rune. At the instant his punch landed, the area of 10,000 feet or even more died with a bang. The rune let out a roar that had never been heard before, and as the thousands of people guarding the rune on the continent in the immortal world let out shrill screams of pain, they coughed up blood at the same time. Black aura surrounded their bodies, and there was also curse corroding their bodies. The three old men in the middle shuddered, and at the instant a large amount of black spots appeared on their skin. The rune beneath them crumbled with a bang. At the same time the rune on the immortals' continent crumbled, the rune that Su Ming had thrown his punch shattered to pieces, and a violent wave of impact instantly swept through the area. At the instant it crumbled, the nearly 1,000 figures that were still descending in the rune immediately let out shrill screams of pain, filled with unwillingness to admit defeat, and all of them shattered. Yet at the instant the rune shattered, 3 more runes instantly appeared in the sky. They were together with the runes that had not been destroyed previously. These 4 runes shone with a brilliant light, and more immortals descended, as if this was the immortals' retaliation towards Su Ming for destroying one of their runes. A strong urge rose in Su Ming's heart. This urge came from the connection he had with Great Yu Imperial City in his heart, as if it had gained physical form. He also had a feeling that, as long as he called out to it, it would appear and answer him. Great Yu Imperial City. At the instant these 4 words tumbled out of Su Ming's mouth, a loud bang immediately rang out in his heart. At the same time, an endless amount of freezing air erupted madly from the vortex that was hundreds of thousands of leagues above the Berserker's Dead Sea. That freezing air could freeze the universe, and as it erupted, the entire Dead Sea instantly stopped roaring. A city so vast that it was difficult to describe with words appeared after being buried for so many years. That was Great Yu Imperial City, the Berserker's holy land. It was getting further and further away from the 3rd place, but it was not impossible for it to surpass it. Please recommend votes. Please recommend votes for the explosion next week. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 768. At the instant Great Yu Imperial City appeared, and the ancient site that had been buried in the depths of the Dead Sea for an endless amount of years was revealed to the world. A chilling aura that surged into the sky instantly spread out in all directions. Wherever that chilling aura went, the Dead Sea would freeze, as if it was about to be frozen. The rotation of the vortex in the sky would also slow down at that instant. The weather in the land of berserkers became much colder because of it. Great U Imperial City was incredibly huge. At that moment, when it rose from the Dead Sea, the people could see the construction of the entire city, as well as the various palaces of Great U Imperial Palace, which gave off an awe-inspiring air. However, all of this was sealed in ice. It did not matter whether it was the city or the palaces, all of them were enveloped in a thick layer of ice. It might have seemed like Great U Imperial City, but in truth, it was a gigantic block of ice. It possessed its own intelligence, and due to Su Ming's summoning, it had appeared after being buried for an endless amount of years. At the instant it rushed out of the surface of the sea, the ice covering the entire city swiftly distorted and disappeared from the Dead Sea. However, the chilling aura did not disappear. Instead, it became even stronger. Soon after, in the spot where the Immortals and Berserkers descended in Eastern Wastelands, where there were more than 100,000 Immortals and Berserkers fighting against each other, the world before Su Ming distorted, and the disappeared Great U Imperial City appeared. An unimaginably mighty pressure spread out from Great U Imperial City that had suddenly appeared. That pressure looked as if it had gained corporeal form, and wherever it went, the entire world would instantly freeze. The Immortals' expressions instantly changed drastically. They could clearly feel their bodies, and even their nascent divinities and souls being squeezed madly. All of them could no longer stand in the sky, and all of them fell to the ground. This is Great U Imperial City. The Holy Land, Great U Imperial City. The Great U Imperial City that has disappeared for an endless amount of years. The Berserkers burst into an uproar. In the midst of disbelief and endless excitement, all those with Berserker blood in their veins looked at Great U Imperial City with bloodshot eyes. As booming sounds rang out in their minds, they trembled and knelt down to worship the Imperial City. Tears fell from the eyes of all the Berserkers. To the Berserkers, Great U Imperial City represented everything to them. At that moment, when they saw Great U Imperial City with their own eyes and how it had been frozen for an unknown number of years, the Berserkers' blood began to burn with anger in the midst of their excitement. On the other hand, the faces of all the Immortals had turned pale. Even the 4 teleportation formations in the sky seemed to have stopped at the instant Great U Imperial Palace appeared, and no more Immortals descended upon them. This was Su Ming's counterattack against the 4 runes that had appeared. Su Ming stood there and looked at Great U Imperial City, which he had summoned. At that moment, the vague feeling of being connected to it became stronger in his heart, especially when he saw the figure of an old man sealed in ice on the tall altar in the Imperial City. He was the elder of Great U. He also saw the numerous corpses kneeling under the frozen altar. All of them were the warriors of the Berserkers who had been in the Imperial City in the past. Once Great U Imperial City appeared, the slaughter in the area came to a halt. Su Ming took a step forward and instantly appeared above Great U Imperial City, stepping on the gigantic block of ice. The tens of thousands of Berserkers around him were crying and worshipping him. At that moment, no matter what level of cultivation they had, all of them had a single thought in their heads. That thought was like a storm in their minds, as if the repressed emotions that had been buried for a long time had erupted. Great U Imperial City was the Berserkers' holy land. With my will, I will make Great U Imperial City appear in the world from the endless Dead Sea. Su Ming stood on the block of ice, and as all the Berserkers knelt down and worshipped him and the tens of thousands of Immortals trembled in shock, his voice reverberated in all directions. With the tears of the Berserkers, melt the ice on Great U Imperial City. With the blood of the Immortals, melt the ice on Great U Imperial City and make it stand tall on the land once again. From now on, the land of Berserkers will kill all Immortals who descend to this land. As Su Ming spoke, once his level of cultivation reached life cultivation realm, The nascent divinity that belonged to the immortals melted and fused with his will and soul to form an Atman that belonged solely to those in life cultivation realm. He lifted his right hand swiftly and swung it around him. Immediately, the tears falling from the corners of the eyes of all the berserkers kneeling down flew up at the same time. The tears from tens of thousands of berserkers gathered together and charged towards Su Ming. More accurately speaking, they were charging towards the ice on Great Yu Imperial City. With their hot tears, they would melt the ice, and with the tears of the berserkers, they would make Great Yu Imperial City stand tall. The endless amount of tears contained all the berserkers' hearts and souls. At that moment, they fell like rain on the ice sealing Great Yu Imperial City, and the ice started showing signs of melting. The degree of melting is not enough. Berserkers, let us use the heat of the immortal's blood to melt our holy land. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. At the instant his words spread in all directions, all the berserkers immediately lifted their heads, and crazed killing intent appeared in their eyes. With the heat of the immortal's blood, melt our holy land. This was the roar of all the berserkers. As they roared, Su Ming became the god of berserkers and made the berserkers' blood burn. His level of cultivation increased exponentially. The berserker souls were born. The appearance of Great Yu Imperial City ignited all the berserkers' souls in the land, and the repeated impacts and madness that came from their hearts among the tens of thousands of berserkers in the land. A berserker who had attained great completion in the awakening realm suddenly had his cultivation base erupt with a bang in the midst of the roar that represented all the berserkers in the land. At the same time, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Su Ming. He reached the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm from the great completion in the awakening realm. Almost the instant this person's cultivation base reached a breakthrough, more people's cultivation bases erupted as they roared. Many of the cultivators in the awakening realm reached the bone sacrifice realm. Similarly, the berserkers in the bone sacrifice realm who had attained great completion in the bone sacrifice realm but did not have the confidence to reach the berserker soul realm broke through the ancient sacrifice realm and stepped into the berserker soul realm at that instant. This was not a single person's cultivation base increasing exponentially. This was the eruption of all the berserkers in the land at the same time. Every single person's level of cultivation had increased by a level due to the appearance of Great Yu Imperial City and their blood. The initial stage became the middle stage. The middle stage became the later stage. The later stage became the great completion stage. And as for the great completion stage, it meant that they had jumped straight into another realm. It was especially so for Xue Sha, Tian Qi, and the other powerful Eastern Wastelands berserkers who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. They might not have truly stepped in a life cultivation realm, but as the entire berserker's blood evolved and they roared, they took half a step forward. They were no longer berserkers who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm, but had taken half a step into life cultivation realm. Their strength might still not be able to compare to Su Ming's, but they had caused the berserker's power to go through a drastic change. The increase in their levels of cultivation not only caused their roars to shake the sky and earth, it also symbolized the rise of the entire berserker soul realm. Kill them. Su Ming let out a low growl. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the immortals on the ground. With it, the black aura of death around him charged out and turned into a black aquatic dragon in the direction where Su Ming pointed. With a ferocious roar, it rushed into the immortals' ranks. At the same time, all the berserkers turned into an endless amount of long arcs that charged towards the immortals, bringing with them the excitement and madness brought by the increase in their levels of cultivation. As booming sounds erupted and Su Ming pointed forward, the black aquatic dragon tore apart the immortals. The tens of thousands of immortals who had been enveloped by the barrier Su Ming had placed previously started trembling in despair. Most of their bodies exploded with a bang, and blood gushed into the air. An even more brutal slaughter was carried out just like that. The immortals who died had already witnessed Su Ming's rise to power and witnessed the Berserker's collapse. If it was not because of Su Ming's plans, it would have been impossible for them to have survived until now. Right then, their only value was to use their blood to melt the ice on Great Yu Imperial City. This was Su Ming's counterattack towards the immortals who had summoned 3 runes as a form of retaliation due to 1 rune collapsing. If you summon 3 runes, then I will summon Great Yu Imperial City and kill all the immortals to use their blood to melt the ice. If you summon another rune and descend once more, then the war between the immortals and berserkers will be fought to the bitter end. The sounds of battle reverberated in the sky. Ji In's face turned pale. Even he could not fight against the berserkers who had already risen to power, especially since Di Tian's magical body had died and Su Ming's strength had shaken his heart. The suppression the berserkers' world placed on the immortals was rapidly becoming stronger. Before long, this suppression would increase, and the immortals' levels of cultivation would be largely limited. Ji In understood that all laws were relatively balanced. If there was a higher level of cultivation, then there would definitely be a lower level of cultivation. If all the berserkers' blood evolved and all the people's levels of cultivation increased, then the laws in the world of berserkers would become stronger. Once these laws became stronger, then the power that the immortals could bring out in the land of berserkers in death would naturally be suppressed once again. This was also why the immortals did not dare to step into the land of berserkers when the first god of berserkers was around. At that time, the berserkers were too strong, so much so that the laws in the land of berserkers had reached an unimaginable state. Even if a powerful warrior in the 3rd step stepped into the land of berserkers, they would instantly be unable to bring out the power of those in ascendance. At that moment, without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand, and an ancient jade slip with an endless amount of runic symbols carved on it appeared in his hand. That jade slip exuded an ancient air, making it clear that it was an ancient item. It was also definitely not an ordinary item. As the runic symbols shone brightly and dimly on it, it looked as if they contained the laws in the galaxy. At that moment, he crushed the jade slip without any hesitation. At the instant the jade slip shattered, a powerful light erupted from Ji An's magical body, and under that light, his body instantly disappeared. Su Ming looked coldly at the spot where Ji An had disappeared. He could sense a ripple of relocation over there. This was the sign of Ji An leaving the land of immortals. As one of the 3 sovereigns, he might only be a magical body, but he was definitely not someone the other immortals could hope to compare to. That jade slip could even break through the void world, causing Ji An to choose to leave. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 769. At the instant Ji An left, a large amount of immortals' blood flew into the sky and charged towards Great Yu Imperial City. At the instant the immortals' blood landed on the ice, the layer of ice began to melt on a large scale. The more it melted, the stronger the mighty pressure that spread out became, and the stronger the pressure became, the more the laws in the world of berserkers erupted. This was a cycle, and when it came to the immortals, it caused all the immortals who descended to the land of berserkers to have their levels of cultivation continuously suppressed and weakened. Because of that, the berserkers' slaughter became even more frenzied. Su Ming did not participate too much in this slaughter. At that moment, he lifted his head and his gaze fell on the 4 runes in the sky. These 4 runes had stopped operating once Great Yu Imperial City appeared. This was not due to the mighty pressure from Great Yu Imperial City, but because the runes connected to the land of immortals were hesitating. As the slaughter continued, shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air. The entire world was filled with the stench of blood, and the immortals' blood continued tumbling into the sky as their bodies crumbled, turning into a part of the melting Great Yu Imperial City. The large amount of blood caused the ice covering Great Yu Imperial City to look crimson, and the speed at which it melted also became faster. At that moment, The 4 runes that had descended to the land after a moment of silence suddenly shone. In an instant, the light became several times stronger, and right before everyone's eyes, people swiftly descended. As those figures descended, in the blink of an eye, nearly 10,000 immortals erupted with powerful presences. At the instant they revealed themselves with a bang, their powerful presences immediately froze, as if they were being pushed down by an invisible hand, causing the power that the immortals could bring out to be suppressed to around the early stage of Ascendant. This was the Berserker's Kismet, the Berserker's Law, the Berserker's Soul, the Berserker's Great Imperial City, and the evolution of the Berserker's Blood, which affected the power of the Berserker's Laws. At the same time, a large number of Berserkers from small tribes and scattered people turned into long arcs and charged over from all directions. They could sense the blood in their bodies boiling and their cultivation bases erupting. When they saw Great Imperial City, they followed the guidance of their blood and rushed over to join the battle. Su Ming took a step forward, and the black smoke around his body instantly gathered together to turn into a set of armor. At the same time, he lifted his right hand and seized the air. Purple smoke appeared out of nowhere and turned into the Undertaker of Evil's spear in his right hand. He grabbed the spear, and a murderous aura around his body surged into the sky. At the instant he took a step forward, the world immediately rumbled, and an illusory foot manifested. This was naturally Su Ming's god of Berserkers' 7 steps. He took 7 steps in a row, and the 7 illusory feet instantly fused together to form a giant that looked like it was stepping on the ground. It stomped down on the immortals who had descended from the sky with a bang. As violent booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming turned into a long black arc and charged into the crowd. Wherever he went, not a single immortal could make him stop for even a single moment. This was a massacre where the difference in strength was completely unequal. Su Ming, who had stepped into life cultivation realm and reached the initial stage of life matrix, was now invincible in the world of berserkers. This invincibility might be due to various reasons, especially the suppression from the laws, but no matter what, Su Ming was invincible. Even those who could suppress Su Ming in the world of immortals were restricted by the laws in the land of berserkers, and it was difficult for them to withstand even a single casual strike from Su Ming. The Undertaker of Evil's spear swept horizontally, and as Su Ming moved forward, it pierced the center of an old immortal's brows. Unwillingness to admit defeat and despair appeared on the old man's face. That unwillingness was because he was a cultivator in the 2nd step when he was in the land of immortals. He believed that if he was in the land of immortals, then this person who wanted to kill him would definitely not be able to succeed, but in this place he could only die in regret. Su Ming swung the Undertaker of Evil's spear, and the old man's body immediately crumbled. His blood charged towards the ice on Great Imperial City. Su Ming took a step forward, and without even looking back, he seized the air with his left hand. Immediately, the middle-aged immortal who had been charging forward and executing his killing move felt sharp pain in his neck, and he could not breathe because Su Ming's left hand was like a clamp that had already pinched him out. Without a single moment of hesitation, Su Ming tightened his grip, and with a bang, the middle-aged man's head crumbled. The aura of death from Su Ming surged into his body and destroyed his nascent divinity and soul. As Su Ming continued his slaughter, the immortals launched a powerful counterattack. The bloody stench in the world became so thick that it was difficult to describe with words. It could only be said that the ground was red, and besides the vortex in the sky, everything else was red. Kill them. Su Ming swung the Undertaker of Evil's spear forward, and it let out a series of booming sounds. Wherever it went, a large number of immortals would have their flesh and blood torn apart. The scenes of Su Ming's slaughter greatly stimulated the berserkers, and his invincibility also caused all the berserkers to let out excited roars. They wanted to kill all the immortals. They wanted to completely chase them out of the land of berserkers. God of berserkers! God of berserkers! Roars reverberated in the air, shaking the sky and earth, and the entire battlefield turned into hell. The four rune vortexes in the sky erupted with a powerful light once again. This time, there were not as many immortals descending on the battlefield as before. There were only about 7,000 of them. When they arrived, their levels of cultivation were also immediately suppressed by the laws in the world of berserkers. They could only show themselves to be around ascendants, and they were absolutely not Su Ming's opponent. With an invincible presence, he swept through the battlefield and stirred up an endless amount of blood to melt Great Yu Imperial City. At that moment, Su Ming's presence was incomparable. However, the berserkers' enemy was the immortals. The immortals' power and numbers were not something the berserkers could hope to compare to. This was also why the berserkers had been able to make all worlds worship them in the past, while the immortals could not do the same. Yet now, the immortals still existed, and they were still as powerful as ever, while the berserkers had fallen to an extreme state of decline. If Su Ming had not appeared, they might not have been able to rise to power. They could only slowly lose their blood, and in the end, they would disappear like a flash in the pan. Almost at the moment, Su Ming picked up the Undertaker of Evil's spear in his right hand and threw it towards the 7,000 immortals who had descended once more. The spear turned into a long purple dragon that charged forward. In an incredibly strange manner, Su Ming's body suddenly came to a halt while he was originally moving forward. With it, the Undertaker of Evil's armor, which was formed by the black smoke on Su Ming's body, immediately crumbled. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth, and an intense pain that was almost unbearable spread out from his chest. That pain came too suddenly, and Su Ming was completely caught off guard. As the pain spread out, it was as if a needle had stabbed into his heart, wanting to pierce through it. Veins popped up on Su Ming's face. As his body trembled, he lifted his head and glared at Death Vortex in the sky. He could clearly sense that there was no one around him who was trying to ambush him. The strange injury and intense pain seemed to have come from somewhere else. Almost at the instant the pain in his chest spread out, an even stronger pain came from the center of Su Ming's brows, as if a needle had stabbed into the center of his brows and into his brain. Su Ming shuddered, but before the two waves of pain disappeared, the unbearable pain traveled through his arms once again, and it also traveled through his legs. The intense pain was like a tidal wave, and it made Su Ming descend into madness. He coughed up a huge mouthful of blood and staggered backwards. This sudden scene from Su Ming caused all the berserkers who saw it to be stunned, and it caused crazed delight to appear on the immortals' faces. Without a hint of hesitation, the numerous immortals in the sky charged towards Su Ming. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the numerous immortals' divine abilities crashed into Su Ming's body, causing his face to turn pale. He coughed up blood once again and retreated. Just as he was about to counterattack, a wave of pain that was even stronger than before traveled through his Dantian region. It was as if a hand had sunk deep into his stomach and grabbed his organs before yanking them out of his body. Su Ming's entire body was drenched in sweat, and even his consciousness had become blurry. When he saw the immortals around him casting their divine abilities once again with ferocious expressions in their excitement, a shadow appeared before Su Ming, and his eldest senior brother stood there with the gigantic axe in his hand. Like a huge mountain, he blocked off all the divine abilities that were attacking Su Ming. Blood continued trickling down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. This sudden accident could even change the tides of the battle. The berserkers' anxiety also allowed the immortals, who had suffered heavy casualties just now, to let out a sigh of relief before they started their counterattack. Berserker's Kismet, Death Aura. Su Ming bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to wake up. He lifted his right hand and pushed it against the ground, then pointed at Death Vortex in the sky with his left hand. "Who injured me?" Su Ming lifted his head and let out a roar that shook the sky and earth. His power in the initial stage of life matrix erupted with a bang at that instant. As he did so, Su Ming closed his eyes, but an illusion appeared on his body. That illusion was the soul of Su Ming's will, and this was something that only those in life cultivation realm could do. They could make their Atman leave their bodies. At the instant his Atman appeared, a decaying gray hue could be seen with the naked eye in eastern wastelands, the islands of South Morning, the northern province, the alliance of the western region, and the Dead Sea. Part of the land's life force was extracted by the berserker's kismet and charged towards Su Ming. It surged into his body through his right hand, then rushed into his Atman. At that moment, an endless amount of aura of death came charging towards Su Ming from death vortex in the sky. It fused into his Atman through his left hand, causing his Atman to sweep up the black smoke and all the kismet in the world of berserkers to charge into death vortex. With a bang, Su Ming's Atman rushed into the vortex in the sky and charged through it. Who injured me? Intense pain made Su Ming descend into madness. The Atman he sent out brought with it his killing intent and madness, as well as a vague guidance. In the span of a breath, he rushed out of the vortex in death region and appeared in the Immortals galaxy. He did not stop. At the instant, the black aura of death around his Atman was swiftly evaporated by the Immortals' bright sun. He moved through the endless distance and saw the endless continents spread out in the distant galaxy. He saw hundreds of thousands of Immortals, and there were even more of them, but they could not see him. Su Ming had a strong feeling that the source of his pain was right in front of him. It will explode tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 770. This week, I was in third place for half a day. The rest of the time, I was in fourth place. The difference between me and the third place was about 2,000 votes. Although I promised everyone on Monday that as long as I was in the top 3, I would explode twice this week. The 2 times were not in the third place, but in the fourth place. But now, even if I'm not in third place, everyone has worked hard. So I will explode on Sunday. I know that by doing this, there will definitely be people who will not vote for me, because they will think as long as Jin says it, he will explode regardless of whether we vote for him or not. It will be the same even if we don't vote for him. People are selfish, I can understand. This is not a trade, this is friendship. I value friendship. If you value friendship, please value me. Thank you, explode tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 771. Su Ming could see the Immortals galaxy, the countless floating continents, the numerous Immortals on those continents, and the runes flashing on them. Intense pain surrounded his Atman, and a large amount of aura of death surrounded his body. At that moment, as Su Ming charged forward, a large amount of that aura dissipated. At that moment, Su Ming's Atman was filled with madness. He wanted to see just what was the source of his intense pain. His Atman moved through the continents, and he saw a large number of altars on those continents. There was a corpse lying on each of those altars. He also saw more than a dozen runes on those continents. These runes were all letting out ripples of relocation, but only 4 of them were shining with a piercing light. He saw thousands of people sitting on those 4 shining runes, and he saw Immortals continuously stepping into the runes around him to be relocated. However, none of this was the source of his pain. Once Su Ming's Atman swept through the area, he charged towards the depths of the floating continents in the galaxy. Perhaps a long time had passed, or perhaps it had only been the blink of an eye, but the largest continent appeared in front of Su Ming. It was far larger than the other continents, and it was the most astonishing region in the place. There was only a gigantic altar on it. Su Ming could vaguely see a person lying on that altar. This was not the first time he came to this place. When he killed Sima Exine, he had come here before, but he had not been able to see it clearly. However, now that Su Ming had come here once again, he could see more than he had in the past, and he could also see things even more clearly. He saw an indescribable pressure spreading out from the tall altar, and there were also an endless amount of powerful seals surrounding the area. It was as if the person lying within those seals was incredibly important to the entire immortal world, but they were also incredibly wary of him, which was why they were sealing him in layers of seals. In fact, Su Ming could even tell that the continents in the galaxy had clearly been grouped together to form a rune in the galaxy, and the core of that rune was this place. It was the person lying on the only altar on the largest continent, and he was sealed in layers of seals. He was too far away and could not see that person's face clearly, but at the instant Su Ming's Atman saw that person, a raging storm and booming sounds immediately stirred up in his soul. It was a summon, an incredibly strong summon. It was so strong that Su Ming felt as if his soul was about to crumble at that instant. It was as if the person lying on the altar was more important to him than his life. Under that strong call, Su Ming immediately felt that the source of his pain was right there. Su Ming's Atman charged forward madly. As he got closer, he saw that there was not only one person calling out to him on the altar. There were 3 middle-aged men standing beside the person lying on the altar. The 3 of them stood there calmly, but they gave Su Ming the misconception that they were ancient, ferocious beasts. It was as if the entire galaxy was trembling because of their existence. A powerful presence that almost suffocated Su Ming surrounded the area. The 3 of them were dressed in white, black, and red respectively. The middle-aged man in the white robe held a black needle in his right hand and a transparent bottle in his left. That bottle was filled with a red liquid that looked like fresh blood. At the instant Su Ming got closer, he saw the white-robed man pushing the needle deep into the bottle. Once he smeared some red blood on it, he stabbed it into the center of the brows of the sealed person lying beside him. Su Ming immediately felt a sharp pain at the center of his brows. His Atman shuddered as if he was about to scatter. At the instant the man stabbed him with the needle, Su Ming finally closed in, and he saw the complete face of the person sealed on the altar. At the instant he saw it, a loud bang that could make the world crumble rang out in Su Ming's heart. It was a boy who looked to be only 18 or 19 years old. He was lying on the altar and dressed in a short shirt made of coarse cloth. His face was as pale as a corpse, or perhaps more accurately speaking, he was a person, a corpse. He was very thin and looked incredibly frail. His pale skin and closed eyes gave off the feeling that he was an ignorant child in the mortal world. There were black needles at the center of his brows, his chest, his limbs, and his dantian region. Besides the black needles in those spots, there were also 100-something white needles on his body. At the instant Su Ming saw the boy, his Atman shuddered. That shudder came from his soul, as if he and the corpse had always been one. It was as if, as long as his Atman could fuse into the corpse, then the corpse would open its eyes and be resurrected. The boy's appearance was incredibly similar to Su Ming's. "He's me." This thought suddenly appeared in Su Ming's mind. He could also sense a hint of familiarity from the blood on the black needles. In the span of a few breaths, that feeling seemed to have turned into a faint voice calling out to his big brother by his ears. At that moment, once Su Ming saw everything, the 3 people standing beside the corpse lifted their heads swiftly, and their gazes fell on the spot where Su Ming's Atman was. Su Ming could not see their faces clearly, because the presence spreading out from their bodies was simply too great. However, at the instant they lifted their heads and looked towards him, Su Ming immediately sensed a hint of Dition's presence from the white-robed man's gaze. With a bang, Su Ming's Atman instantly crumbled and disappeared from the Immortals galaxy. He did not have time to see too much. At the instant his Atman crumbled and disappeared, Su Ming opened his eyes in the land of berserkers. Before him was his eldest senior brother, and before him were thousands of immortals who had descended from the land of immortals charging towards them with ferocious expressions. The disappearance of a hint of his Atman would affect Su Ming, but it would not affect him too much. He would recover after some time of recuperation. Besides, everything that this hint of his Atman saw caused a dazed look to appear on his face for an instant when he opened his eyes. He finally understood the final question in his heart. The boy on the altar was him, the baby from all those years ago. However, even though the baby was dead, from a certain perspective, he was not dead either. Over the years, the dead baby had slowly grown up and turned into a boy. This meant that there were still some mysteries about him that others might not be able to understand. But he was still a dead man, and people thought that his soul was no longer in his body, but in death region. Su Ming shuddered. The dazed look in his eyes disappeared, replaced by understanding as well as madness. He understood that the boy was him, and right then, he was just a wisp of his soul. He was a soul that had been sent to death region. When he combined all the memories that Su Ming had recalled time and again, a clear scene appeared in his head. Once the two babies were brought out of the land of berserkers by Tian, the immortals could tell that there was something different about them. One of them was the older brother, and the other was the younger sister. As the younger sister gradually grew up, she was taken away, and no one knew where she went. The only clue they had was Dao Chun. As for the older brother, he could only lie quietly in the endless darkness. He could only let his madness burn and rage, and he could only let an endless amount of immortals use his body to train. Yet in the end, everything in his body should have been discovered by someone, and they knew that a soul had appeared in his body. Once this change happened, his soul was extracted as it slowly grew. Perhaps it was because it could not be destroyed, or perhaps it was because if his soul died, his body would no longer possess the mysteries that could interest the immortals. That was why his soul did not disappear, but was sent to death region, and he was doomed for all eternity. Perhaps it was at this moment that Tian saw the difference in this soul, and he executed his plan that had been going on for ages. Su Ming understood all of this. Leave death region, return to the land of immortals, fuse with my real body, and then open my eyes. Su Ming's expression was dark. There was madness and a hint of grief on his face. Once he understood all of this, he started laughing brokenly. That laughter was filled with hate towards the immortals, his resistance towards fate, and his desire to overturn the universe and the heavens. A roar tumbled out of Su Ming's mouth, and madness could be seen in that roar. He stood up, and the pain in his body was still spreading through his body. In fact, there were even more parts of his body where the pain was like a tidal wave that was about to drown him. You stimulated my physical body and destroyed my soul. But even if you destroyed my physical body, you wouldn't be able to truly wipe off my soul from death region. Because we are in different worlds. You're in Bright Yang, and I, Su Ming, am in death. This kind of pain is nothing. Su Ming lifted his head and roared. His entire body trembled, and the pain in his body turned into madness. His eldest senior brother was currently fighting against thousands of immortals before him. Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot, and under the intense pain, he charged forward with a bang. Kill! He wanted to stir up a massacre that surged into the sky to vent the pain in his body. Only by killing could he make more people pay with their lives for the pain that came from his soul. Only kill. As Su Ming roared, he charged into the crowd of immortals like a shooting star. His eyes were bloodshot, and wherever he went, not a single immortal would be able to put up even the slightest bit of resistance before him. With his current level of cultivation, which was invincible in the land of berserkers, he killed the immortals whose levels of cultivation had been largely suppressed after they descended. Blood rained down from the sky and spilled on the ground, turning the area into a bloody hell. He turned his pain into endless slaughter, using the immortals' lives and blood to pour over his body to vent his madness. Su Ming lifted his right hand and hurled it forward. Immediately, the eyes of a female cultivator before him went wide. Her body could not fight against the power of life cultivation realm, and she crumbled swiftly. As blood gushed into the air, Su Ming took a step forward, opened his mouth, and let out the god of berserker's roar. That roar reverberated in the air and caused the air to distort, causing the hearts of the numerous immortals before Su Ming to roar. Blood gushed out from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and all of them fell into a daze. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 772. Where did I come from? Su Ming swung his arm, and booming sounds immediately reverberated in the air before him. A sea of fire burned, and from the distance, most of the world had turned into a world of fire. Why did I appear as a dead baby? Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. He lifted his left hand, formed a seal, and pointed forward. Immediately, the space before him shattered. Cracks appeared and spread out rapidly. Wherever they went, all the immortals who were touched by them would be separated from their bodies at the spot where they came into contact with them. Do I have any family? Su Ming leaped up. His expression was contorted, and veins popped up on his skin. The intense pain in his body caused him to descend into even greater madness. The more intense the pain became, the more he wanted to erupt and use this method to fight against this pain. Intense pain could make a person break down. This was common sense. However, intense pain could also make a person descend into madness. This was a subversion. Do I have any parents? Su Ming roared. As he charged forward, he rammed his head into an old immortal. This old immortal who was in the second step was as fragile as a thin sheet of paper at that moment. Once Su Ming rammed his head into his forehead in a frenzy, his head exploded and scattered everywhere like paste. His body fell to the ground, and his nascent divinity was destroyed. Do I have any family? Su Ming grabbed an immortal cultivator in front of him with both hands. As intense pain shot through his body, he tore at the immortal's body in a frenzy and tore it apart from the middle. Just why do I exist? Wherever Su Ming went, blood would turn into rain. The number of deaths caused the berserkers to feel apprehensive, but at the same time, they let out excited roars, and they started fighting madly against the immortals in this world. You made me feel pain, then I will retaliate with several times the number of deaths. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the Undertaker of Evil's spear manifested. Once he threw it forward, a loud bang rang in the air, and shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air. At that moment, the 4 relocation runes in the sky shone with a piercing light. Thousands of people descended together, and once they revealed themselves, powerful rays of light erupted from the 4 runes. 2 of them charged towards the ground and crashed into the invisible barrier Su Ming had placed. The barrier immediately shattered, allowing the immortals on the ground to fly up. The other 2 rays of light charged towards Su Ming and closed in on him in an instant. Su Ming turned his head around and lifted his right hand to push towards the first incoming ray of light. Booming sounds surged into the sky. That ray of light instantly distorted and shattered, but at the same time, the second ray of light shot through the air and crashed into Su Ming's body. Su Ming staggered 100-something feet backwards. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth, but the crimson shade in his eyes grew stronger. Soon after, the thousands of immortals who had descended rushed towards him. Once the barrier on the ground shattered, the immortals who were fighting against the berserkers on the ground also flew up, causing the battlefield to instantly expand. Su Ming was killing, and the entire berserkers let out roars of power in the midst of their slaughter. This battle had continued up to this point, and it had already turned into a situation where no one would die. Either all the berserkers' bloodline would be destroyed, or the immortals would give up on descending and disappear without a trace in the land of berserkers, waiting for their deaths. Su Ming punched the air, and the ripples that spread out shook the immortals around him. He lifted his left hand and seized the air. Immediately, the bodies of the 3 immortals to his left crumbled as they let out shrill screams of despair. A large amount of blood swept up from all directions in the battlefield and charged towards Great U Imperial City, which was in midair, causing the ice on the Imperial City to melt rapidly. In fact, some parts of the city were already revealed. Once he seized the air, Su Ming turned around swiftly and lifted his right index finger to tap a powerful gust of wind that was charging towards him from his side. Before his finger landed, Su Ming saw the face of the person who had ambushed him without regard for anything else. That was Jingnan. the sect master of Hidden Dragon Sect in the land of Berserkers, the elder of Windstream Tribe in Su Ming's memories, Jingnan. From now on, you will be wiped off from my memories. Su Ming's eyes were filled with red. His voice was like a freezing gust of wind that pierced into Jingnan's bones. At the instant his words traveled into Jingnan's ears, he tapped the center of his brows with his right index finger. With a bang, Jingnan's body crumbled, and he died just like that. Su Ming, an enraged roar came from the crowd. It came from Chinchong, and it was also Chunchong. This was the prodigy of Windstream Tribe in Su Ming's memories. When he saw Su Ming killing Jingnan, grief appeared on his face, and he charged toward Su Ming. When he closed in, he lifted his right hand and seized at the air. Immediately, a bottle appeared in his hand. If you attack me, then you will also be wiped off from my memories, Su Ming said flatly. As he spoke, Chinchong closed in on him. When he lifted the bottle in his hand, a gust of freezing wind instantly blew out from the mouth of the bottle. That freezing wind brought with it moaning and howling sounds as it swept through the area and charged towards Su Ming without any hesitation. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. In silence, he lifted his right hand and pushed his palm towards the incoming freezing wind. Once his palm shot through it, it landed on the bottle. The bottle shuddered and immediately shattered into pieces as it tumbled backwards. However, the speed at which it tumbled backwards could not compare to Su Ming's right hand. Su Ming's right hand shot through the bottle and seized Chinchong's neck. The great difference between their levels of cultivation made it so easy for Su Ming to kill Chinchong. Are you seeking death on purpose? Su Ming grabbed Chinchong's neck and looked at this prodigy of Windstream Tribe in his memories. This was the person who had been surrounded like the moon by the stars in the past, and he could only watch from the sidelines. So what if I'm seeking death? You've already killed so many immortals. You don't mind killing me as well. Su Ming, you're no longer the you from Dark Mountain. You. Su Ming tightened his right hand, and a cracking sound rang out. Before Chinchong could finish speaking, he died. Su Ming's great power had destroyed his nascent divinity. Don't talk about Dark Mountain in front of me. You're not worthy. Su Ming let go of Chinchong and cast his gaze around him. He saw the faces in his memories among the immortals, and all of them were staring at him coldly. Some of those gazes were also filled with complicated emotions. They belonged to Wu La, Chun Xin, Bei Ling, Nan Song. You killed Chinchong, you killed Jingnan, then kill us as well. The one who said those words was Lei Su, Bai Ling's grandmother in Su Ming's memories. With a single move, the old woman rushed out from the immortals fighting against each other. With a ferocious look, along with a wave of complicated emotions, as well as hatred, she charged towards Su Ming. Su Ming remained silent. Right at the instant Lei Su closed in on him, he lifted his right hand and pointed forward. Before Lei Su could even get close to him, her body shuddered and her head exploded. She died just like that. All the people in Su Ming's memories saw Lei Su's death, and just like Su Ming, they fell silent in the battlefield filled with killing and fleeing. Su Ming lifted his head and swept his gaze across the ground. He suddenly frowned, and with a cold harumph, he took a step back. With that one step, his body immediately crashed into a figure that had suddenly appeared in the air behind him. A shrill scream of pain reverberated in the air, and the figure behind Su Ming revealed the appearance of Sky Mist's ancestor. His body had been torn to pieces, and it was clear that the life force in his body had been completely destroyed when Su Ming crashed into him. Sky Mist's ancestor. Su Ming lifted his left hand and seized the air in the direction of the retreating Sky Mist's ancestor. Immediately, as the old man coughed up blood, his body twisted and charged towards Su Ming's left hand. Su Ming seized his chest. Su Ming. At that moment, two long arcs shot out from the battlefield. Those were Tian Lan Meng and Tian Lan Yu. The two of them were closing in swiftly. The one who had shouted Su Ming's name was Tian Lan Meng, and Tian Lan Yu was charging towards Su Ming with an apathetic look on her face, like a moth flying into a flame. Su Ming cast Tian Lan Meng a glance. His right hand paused for a moment before he crushed Sky Mist's ancestor's chest, crushing his heart and the nascent divinity in his body. Tian Lanming's face turned pale, and she staggered a few steps backwards. At that moment, Tian Lan Yu had already closed in on Su Ming. As she lifted her right hand, she formed a seal and pointed towards him. Su Ming's expression was cold and aloof. The instant Tian Lan Yu closed in on him, he lifted his right hand and seized her hand, then lifted it upwards. With a crack, Tian Lan Yu's right hand twisted, and even her arm was turned around by Su Ming, instantly shattering. Cold sweat broke out on Tian Lan Yu's forehead, but she gritted her teeth. Sky Mist's ancestor injured me in the past. I want to kill him. As for the two of you, Su Ming cast Tian Lanming a glance and let go of Tian Lan Yu's hand. With a swing of his arm, the woman retreated several hundreds of feet and returned to Tian Lanming's side with a pale face. Take care of yourself, and all of you. Su Ming swept his gaze past the faces and his memories on the ground. Today, I will let you leave, and from now on, we will be strangers. Su Ming moved forward and appeared right before evil dust sack Sikong. As Sikong trembled, Su Ming pointed at the center of his brows. You are not included among these people. Su Ming took another step forward, and this time, he appeared right before Bai Su. The woman's expression changed, and she retreated swiftly. With an indifferent expression, Su Ming pointed at the air, and immediately, Bai Su let out a shrill scream of pain before her body was torn to shreds. You are not included either. Su Ming turned around and looked at Bai Su's older brother, evil immortal sex Bai Su. The man's face instantly turned pale, but with a ferocious look, he chose to self-destruct. Clearly, he wanted to use the power of self-destruction to injure Su Ming even if he died. However, before he could complete his self-destruction, Su Ming walked past him and took his head with him. And you. Su Ming appeared before by Tuesday. This elder of Black Mountain tribe in the past, and the current sect master of the Berserkers branch in Evil Lust sect, did not even have a hint of strength to fight back before Su Ming. Second update. Please get monthly votes. Please get recommendation votes. Can you please get us into the top 3 recommended votes at the very last moment today? To be continued. If you like this work, please come come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 773. The World Roared. The 4 rune vortexes rotated once again, and thousands of immortals descended together. Half of Great U Imperial City in the sky had already melted by then. As it melted, a large amount of freezing air spread out, causing the temperature in the area to fall by a large margin. The slaughter continued, and a large number of berserkers had died. This was a frenzied battle between the two sides. After all, the immortals' levels of cultivation were slightly higher than the berserkers. If it was not because of the restrictions imposed by the laws in the land of berserkers, if Su Ming's existence had not allowed the berserkers to increase their levels of cultivation, if their eldest senior brother had not spread out his shaman soul in the battlefield, then it would have been incredibly difficult for the berserkers to win this battle. Fortunately, as the battle continued, more berserkers rushed over due to the guidance of their blood and joined the battle, causing the devastation of the battle to become increasingly greater. It was especially so for Su Ming alone. He was already invincible in the land of berserkers. As he was in life cultivation realm, the immortals and ascendants who had their levels of cultivation suppressed could not hope to fight against him. More importantly, as Great U Imperial City continued melting, the laws in the land of berserkers became stronger. Because of that, even if the immortals continued sending more people to the land, it was still incredibly difficult for them. Unless the immortals could send nearly 100,000 immortals in one go. Only then would they be able to turn the situation around. But this was impossible. The difference between sending thousands of immortals in one go and sending nearly 100,000 immortals in one go was incredibly great. This sort of price was not something the immortals were willing to pay easily. Once thousands of immortals appeared in the rune once again, it did not flash for a long time. The final batch of immortals to descend to the land numbered less than 2,000. As the slaughter continued, the berserkers' madness and the immortals' despair caused the battlefield to gradually tilt in the berserkers' favor. However, it did not matter whether it was the immortals, berserkers, or even Su Ming. They were all filled with deep fatigue. If it was not because there was an endless stream of berserkers joining the battle, their fatigue would have become even worse. At that moment, nearly two-thirds of Great Yu Imperial City had already melted. Besides a small portion of the city that was still sealed in ice, most of the places had already completely melted. Su Ming's entire body was drenched in blood. Most of that blood belonged to the immortals, but some of it was his own. He did not know just how many immortals he had killed in the battlefield. His breathing was rapid, his eyes were bloodshot, and exhaustion could be seen in them. However, the slaughter was still ongoing, and Su Ming could not let his guard down. Besides, the pain in his body had not disappeared and was still there. Under the torment of exhaustion and pain, Su Ming did not retreat. Instead, he endured everything and continued fighting this seemingly never-ending battle. Just when the berserkers had gained a great advantage and there were less than 20,000 immortals left, they were surrounded by the berserkers at the center. The berserkers at the edge of the encirclement nibbled away at the immortals bit by bit in an attempt to wipe out all the immortals. Suddenly, the relocation rune in the sky that had not shone for a long time erupted with a piercing light. At the instant that light appeared and Su Ming lifted his head to look, his pupils shrank. He saw one of the 4 runes shattering on its own as the light shone. As it did so, the light from the runes spread out with a loud bang, and it was absorbed by the other 3 runes. At the same time, 2 of the 3 remaining runes exploded at the same time. Once their light was completely absorbed by the final rune, the only rune in the sky shone with a light that had never been seen before. That light shot through the air and the ground, hanging high in the sky like a sun. A presence that even Su Ming found terrifying spread out from the only rune in the sky. They had destroyed their own runes just to gather up this shocking relocation. Clearly, this was the strongest power the immortals had prepared for this battle, in a situation where not 100,000 immortals would descend in one go. If there was a person who would be relocated, then that person would definitely have an item that could not be suppressed by the laws in the world of berserkers, and that person would definitely have a power that could completely suppress Su Ming. If the person being relocated was not a person, but a supreme treasure, then that treasure would definitely be something that could shake the sky and earth and would definitely be extraordinary. The immortals who were surrounded had hope awaken in the midst of their fatigue and despair. They roared and charged outwards, roaring as they looked at the only rune in the sky. This was also their only hope. Su Ming leaped up, and right before the immortals and berserkers' gazes, he stepped into the air and stood above Great Yu Imperial City's palace, then looked at the only rune in the sky. The light from the rune grew stronger, and once it became the strongest light in the world of berserkers, a destructive and terrifying presence descended with a bang and spread out. Right behind that presence were 2 other presences that erupted forth. By the orders of the immortals, the 3 punishments of heaven, earth, and man have descended to suppress the berserkers. A voice that was as mighty as the might of heaven came from within the rune, but that voice was not clear. It was rather indistinct, a telling sign that it did not come from the land of berserkers, but from the land of immortals through the rune. Almost at the instant that voice reverberated in the air, the first destructive presence immediately erupted from the vortex in the rune. A gray pillar of light appeared and rushed out of the rune. That gray pillar of light was in truth a long arc, and within it was a stone the size of a head. That stone was riddled with holes, causing it to stir up piercing sounds as it charged forward. Its speed was unimaginable, and the mighty pressure spreading out from it brought with it a power that could destroy the sky and earth. That was clearly no longer the power of ascendance, but a power that surpassed that of ascendance. In fact, even Su Ming, who was in life cultivation realm, found it terrifying. Clearly, If this was not an enchanted treasure with the power of those in the peak of the second step, then it was definitely a supreme treasure belonging to those in the third step. This item's appearance was not suppressed by the laws in the land of berserkers, and neither was there any supreme treasure in the land of berserkers to stop it. Clearly, the immortals had executed some sort of method that allowed this item to descend in its entirety. The stone the size of a head within that gray long arc sliced through the sky the instant it descended, but its direction was not towards Su Ming. Instead, it was towards the strongest person besides Su Ming in the land of berserkers, his eldest senior brother, Shingon, who had cut off his own head. The stone was so quick that even Su Ming did not have time to stop it. With a bang, the stone had already appeared right above eldest senior brother's body. A glint appeared in eldest senior brother's eyes on his chest, and with the battle axe in hand, he rushed out and swung his axe at the incoming stone. Yet almost at the moment he lifted his axe and his body was still in midair, the gray stone crumbled and exploded on its own. A gray light spread out and covered an area of several thousands of feet. Within those several thousands of feet were immortals, berserkers, and his eldest senior brother, but as it spread out, his eldest senior brother was the first to be affected. His battle axe was immediately petrified when it was enveloped by the gray light. His body visibly turned into a statue in the blink of an eye. He was not the only one. All the immortals and berserkers within those several thousands of feet turned into statues at the instant the stone exploded and the gray light spread out. They retained their previous actions and expressions, turning into statues that would cause all those who saw them to feel their hearts tremble in shock. This was the immortal's suppression towards the berserker's rise to power. Eldest senior brother, Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. He took a step forward, but just as he was about to go beside his eldest senior brother, who had turned into a statue, another presence that could destroy the sky and earth came from the vortex in the rune in the sky. It was a human head. It was a gigantic human head that looked like a giant. Black blood flowed out of that head's eyes, and its hair was a mess. But even after death, there was still a savage and crazed presence coming from that head. There was also a familiar presence on that head that caused Su Ming and all the berserkers' hearts to tremble. That was a berserker's presence, and it was the head of the god of berserkers. The second god of berserkers. That's the second god of berserkers' head. This berserker's presence, this surge of blood, there's no mistaking it. Once the berserkers saw the head, madness immediately erupted in them. Grief and anger appeared on all of their faces. There was no other item that could make the berserkers so enraged than the god of berserkers' head. Su Ming trembled. His senior brother had turned into a petrified statue, and when he did not know whether he was still alive or not, he saw the second god of berserkers' head again. Once his memories were activated, even though the head's appearance was unfamiliar, its presence was incredibly familiar. This was the gentle voice that had reached his ears in the past. It was the god of berserkers who had died for the berserkers when Great U Imperial City was frozen. The second god of berserkers had been torn apart in the past, and his body had been buried in the land of berserkers. Only his head had been taken away by the immortals, and now it had appeared before them at this moment, and by the looks of it, it had been refined into their supreme treasure. Almost at the instant the second god of berserkers' head appeared, and all the berserkers descended into a state of rage and madness. The head's eyes flew open. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with darkness. The head shuddered, and right before all the berserkers' eyes, it exploded with a bang right before their very eyes. As it exploded, a wave of impact swept through the entire area. That impact did not have much of an effect on the immortals, but to all the berserkers who saw the head explode, it was a blow to their blood. The third update is here. There's one more update to go. Continue writing. Everyone, don't deduct the recommendation votes. If that's the case, it's fine if everyone gets one vote each. If you really don't have any, then Ling Chen's recommendation is even better. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 774. This was the Immortals' final move, a move that targeted all Berserkers. The first Supreme Treasure had turned eldest senior brother, who was the strongest besides Su Ming, into a statue, cutting off all hope that the Berserkers could rise to power once again after Su Ming died. The second Supreme Treasure was targeted at all the Berserkers. With the second god of Berserkers' head crumbling, it launched a charge against their blood. If those who did not possess the blood of the Berserkers flowed through their veins, then they would be completely unharmed. But if they did, then they would face a disaster. All the Berserkers coughed up blood at that instant, and their bodies swiftly withered away. It was as if the blood in their bodies had been sealed. As they coughed up blood, their bodies tumbled backwards, and the impact swept them away in all directions. It did not matter whether it was Xue Sha or Qi Lei Tian. No matter who they were or what level of cultivation they possessed, all of them coughed up blood at the instant the impact hit them. Their bodies were heavily injured, and there were nearly 10,000 Berserkers who were reduced to ashes under the impact. The remaining Berserkers were continuously swept away in all directions with their heavily injured bodies. In the blink of an eye, there was not a single Berserker left on the ground. All of them had been swept away, and no one knew how many tens of thousands of least they had been swept away. No one knew how many of them had managed to survive the impact, except for Su Ming, who was still standing in his original spot, eldest senior brother statue, and the statues that were thousands of feet around him. Besides these, only the Immortals were left. During that instant, the blood that had been coughed up by the Berserkers gathered in midair and turned into a blood-red rune that swiftly descended on the ground and covered all the Immortals. All of you will be sent back to your sex in the land of Berserkers. Activate the rune in your sex and cultivate your natures. Once the Immortals descend again, we will bathe the land of Berserkers in blood. A buzzing sound spread out from the only rune in the sky. As it reverberated in all directions, the Immortals in the land disappeared into the blood-red rune. Once all the Immortals disappeared, besides corpses and blood, Su Ming was the only one left standing in the world. He looked at the sky, and there was no longer any madness on his face. Instead, he had calmed down. The Immortals' methods allowed Su Ming to once again understand just how strong his enemies were. This was the Immortal Tribe, an immortal tribe that had existed for countless years with an incredibly deep foundation. However, it was clear that even the Immortals would have to pay an incredibly great price for the descent of this priceless treasure that the laws in the land of Berserkers could not suppress. Su Ming might not know what this price was, but it would definitely make the Immortals' hearts ache. This was a battle between the Immortals and Berserkers that had no victor. The Immortals did not win, and neither did the Berserkers. If the impact to their blood had happened in the past, most of the Berserkers would have died. But now, even if it was an impact, that had been the burning of their blood and the explosive increase in the Berserkers' levels of cultivation. In this way, although the impact of the impact was still great, more people would survive. Once they survived, it was very likely that their bloodlines would explode again after receiving the impact. This might not be a bad thing for the barbarians. Similarly, too many Immortals in the land of Berserkers had died in the war, and they could not leave. They might have been relocated back to their sex in the land of Berserkers, but they no longer had the pride and arrogance they had in the past. The voice that came from the rune, just now telling all the Immortals to activate the rune once they returned to their sex, had also revealed one thing. The Immortals might not be able to send any more people to descend within a short period of time, which was why they could not use this chance to descend. Instead, they had to let the Immortals in the land of Berserkers activate the rune to protect themselves. After all, the impact to their bloodlines was only limited to this place. There were still more Berserkers charging towards Eastern Wastelands and the islands of South Morning. This war that was originally between the Immortals and evil over the choice made by Eastern Wastelands Tower had turned into a battle between the Immortals and Berserkers. In the end, both sides paid a devastating price, and the war ended. The only thing that did not end was the Immortals' desire to kill Su Ming. The third presence that could destroy the sky, and Earth spread out with a bang from the rune in the sky. It was so strong that at the instant it appeared, the only rune in the sky started trembling viciously. As it trembled, the rune started showing signs of crumbling, but it quickly recovered. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He should have immediately retreated and left the place, but he did not choose to do so. The war might have ended, but there was still one thing he had yet to do. Su Ming leaped up, lifted his right hand, and pointed at Great Yu Imperial City, which had mostly melted. Great Yu Imperial City, destroy this rune. Make it even more difficult for the immortals to descend in the future. This was what Su Ming wanted to do. As he pointed forward, Great Yu Imperial City shuddered with a bang and rose up slowly to charge towards the sky. Su Ming had not done this previously because once the immortals' rune was destroyed, more runes would appear. After all, he could see that there were plenty of these runes on the countless continents in the galaxy. Yet now, since there was only one rune left in the sky above the land of berserkers, since the immortals had sent those 3 priceless treasures to suppress the berserkers, and since the immortals had the cultivators who remained in the land of berserkers activate the rune to defend it, then Su Ming was certain that the immortals had already given up too much for this war. That was why if he destroyed this one and only rune, the immortals might not be able to activate more runes to counterattack, just like they did previously. With that one finger, Great Yu Imperial City's speed became faster, stirring up loud booms that shook the sky and earth as it drew closer to the rune in the sky. At that moment, the destructive presence coming from the rune in the sky grew stronger, and at the instant it erupted with a bang, a ray of blue light shot out. It was a blue sword. The sword's main purpose was to kill, and the blue to seal. This was a sword that could kill all living beings. The presence coming from it made Su Ming's skin crawl and his heart tremble. This was a killing sword that could kill all those whose level of cultivation was lower than the 3rd step. Seal the immortal's rune. If I don't die from this disaster, then I will destroy all the immortal sects in the land of berserkers. Su Ming lifted his head and roared. At the instant the blue sword charged towards him, he controlled Great Yu Imperial City and rammed it against the rune in the sky. The rune crumbled, and at the instant it did so, Su Ming seemed to hear an endless amount of muffled grunts and the sounds of death coming from the land of immortals. The sky rumbled. The blue sword closed in on Su Ming in the span of breath. 4 chapters with a total of 11,000 words were delivered. It was already late at night, and dawn was about to arrive. Everyone, work harder and fight for the recommendation votes. What's wrong with that? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 775. Almost at the instant Great Yu Imperial City crashed into the immortal's rune in the sky and caused it to shatter, Su Ming's mind rushed into the black stone fragment in his chest without any hesitation. The strange dimension in the black stone fragment was Su Ming's life protection art, and it helped him get through a series of dangers more than once. Yet at that moment, almost at the instant Su Ming's mind touched the black stone fragment, he immediately felt as if everything around him had been isolated. His mind could not form any sort of connection with the black stone fragment. The blue sword let out a hum and closed in on him. When it was less than 100 feet away from Su Ming, he gave up on fusing with the black stone fragment without any hesitation and charged towards the ground. The blue sword chased after him, and the killing intent and freezing air spreading out from it made it seem as if it could destroy everything in the world. In fact, Su Ming could not even warp when the blue sword's aura was locked down on him. In the blink of an eye, he landed on the ground, and one of the many corpses on the ground was covered in blood. It was unmoving, but the instant Su Ming closed in on it, he lifted his right foot and kicked it. There was no killing intent in that kick. Instead, a gentle wave of power spread out from Su Ming's body, and once it surged into the unmoving corpse, that power swept it up and sent it flying into the distance. Chen Shun, wait outside Evil Spirit Sect. Once I shake off this killing sword, I'll go find you. Su Ming turned around swiftly, and when the killing sword was only 50 feet away from him, he turned into a long arc and charged in the opposite direction of the corpse. The body that was swept up by the gentle wave of power suddenly blinked at that moment. This person was naturally Qian-shun, who had been pretending to be dead all this while. With a long face, he used the gentle wave of power in his body to swiftly run into the distance. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Just how far is this place from Evil Spirit Sect? Just how far is it? How? How long do I have to run to get back? Qian-shun cried, but he did not dare disobey. He could sense that the gentle wave of power in his body would not leave his body. Instead, it was entrenched in his body, and, by the looks of it, it was definitely some sort of sealing technique. The other party must have been worried about him. That was why he had done this. Damn it, damn it. Even when he's being chased by the blue killing sword, he still has the mood to imprison me. Qian-shun gritted his teeth, but when he remembered how terrifying Su Ming was, he immediately sighed and ran into the distance with gritted teeth. Su Ming did not even turn his head back. He activated all the power in his body and charged forward with a bang. He sliced through the air and stirred up piercing whistles. His expression was incredibly dark because the blue sword was becoming faster behind him. The tip of the sword was already less than 20 feet away from him. Waves of freezing air and mighty pressure pressed down on his body and heart like mountains, and a life-threatening sense of danger filled the air. It was also at this moment that a blue light flashed at the tip of the blue sword. Immediately, an endless amount of power of the world within a circular area of dozens of miles was forcefully extracted and gathered on the blue sword. The sense of danger Su Ming sensed increased exponentially. His expression instantly changed, and without any hesitation, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up a mouthful of blood. That blood immediately enveloped him, causing his speed to instantly increase by several times. However, at the instant Su Ming's speed increased, the blue sword behind him charged forward. Once it extracted the power of the world from a circular area of dozens of lis, it distorted space and appeared behind Su Ming in the blink of an eye. Blue light shone, and as a loud bang and a muffled groan reverberated in the air, the blue sword pierced through Su Ming's chest. It was not aimed at his heart. The increase in Su Ming's speed and the strong sense of danger caused him to move slightly to the side. With that one move, the blue sword practically brushed past Su Ming's heart. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. A destructive power erupted from his body, and with a bang, his legs crumbled and exploded. His left arm also shattered, and half of his body was reduced to ashes. When Su Ming saw that the destructive power was about to extinguish his life and spread out in his body, he circulated all his cultivation base and rammed it against that destructive power. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming's body was like a kite with its strings snapped. With the speed provided by blood escape, he charged out. Su Ming lifted his head and roared. As he gritted his teeth and endured the intense pain, he charged forward madly. There was only a small part of his body left, and the power of that sword had nearly destroyed him. This was because Su Ming had stepped into Life Cultivation Realm. If he had not reached Life Cultivation Realm, he would have definitely died. In fact, even those in Life Cultivation Realm would find it difficult to survive under the blue sword. This was a killing sword for those below the third step. However, berserkers had always focused on the refinement of their bodies, and Su Ming had turned all his flesh, blood, and bones into a berserker when he was in the bone sacrifice realm. This sort of strength was incredibly terrifying, and it was also the reason why he could kill those who were stronger than him. However, even such a powerful body was nearly destroyed by the blue sword. It was a telling sign of the sword's might. Su Ming's face turned pale, and in the midst of his madness, his eyes turned bloodshot. As a small part of his body charged forward in the sky, the blue sword chased after him, as if it would not disappear until it killed Su Ming. Immortals! The destruction of his body caused Su Ming's hatred towards the immortals to grow even stronger. The killing intent from the blue sword did not stop, and a life-threatening sense of danger surrounded Su Ming's heart. He continuously coughed up blood, and every single time he coughed up blood, he would become slightly faster. Yet even so, he could not shake off the blue sword. It charged forward and let out a piercing whistle behind Su Ming. Blue light appeared at the tip of the sword once again, and at the same time, the power of the world within a circular area of 100 lis tumbled backwards and surged towards him. Su Ming's skin crawled. He roared in his heart. The blue sword had been absorbing the power of the world around him like this before it had struck him, and that had only been an area of several dozens of lis, but now it was 100 lis. When the second sword struck, Su Ming knew that he would definitely die. Among the immortals' 3 supreme treasures, the first one had turned his eldest senior brother into stone. The second one had activated the impact in his blood to scatter the berserkers and allow the immortals to relocate them. But if they were to talk about the strongest, it would still be the third supreme treasure. It was the sword that focused on killing. After all, to the immortals, it did not matter whether it was Su Ming's eldest senior brother or the berserkers. None of them could hope to compare to Su Ming. He had to be killed, and no accidents could be allowed to happen to him. That was why this sword that focused on killing had been given a mission when it descended. It had to kill Su Ming. There was a dark look on Su Ming's face. At the instant he sensed the power of the world within an area of 100 lis being forcefully absorbed, a small part of his charging body came to an abrupt halt. He turned around swiftly, and at the instant he did so, he lifted his remaining right hand. The back of his hand was facing downwards, and his palm was facing the sky. What lies between the past and the future is destiny. As Su Ming roared, the blue sword absorbed the power of the world around him, and with a hum, it closed in on him to be less than 10 feet away from him. It was also at that moment that Su Ming swung his right hand towards the incoming blue sword. With that swing, he executed the reversal of time with his current level of cultivation in the initial stage of Life Matrix, and its might far surpassed what he had executed previously. With that one swing, not only did the blue sword change, the world around it also changed. Even the wind and clouds changed. In fact, Su Ming had a strong feeling that if he had enough power, then he could make the laws of the world reverse. In fact, once he reversed the laws of the world, he could make the time of a world flow backwards due to his will, make all his enemies rot away, and make the universe return to its original state. This feeling only appeared in Su Ming's mind for an instant before it gradually disappeared. As he swung his right hand, the incoming blue sword froze for the first time. With it, the blue sword started trembling, and when it was less than 5 feet away from Su Ming, it started retreating slowly. A large amount of the power of the world also flowed out of the sword as time flowed backwards, as if it wanted to return to nothingness. Sweat broke out on Su Ming's forehead. The power of destiny was his origin divine ability. He had always thought that it was using up the power of his cultivation base, but only at that moment did he realize that the power of destiny was not just using up his cultivation base. It was also using up his soul, causing him to feel a deep sense of fatigue. Before he stepped into Life Cultivation realm and reached the initial stage of Life Matrix, Su Ming's destiny art was still at a very low level, which was why it was known as the immortal sign of the abyss. It was just a sign. That was why the drain on his soul was not great. In fact, it was so weak that even Su Ming did not notice it. However, it was also normal. If Su Ming had executed Destiny's reversal of time at that time, it would have been completely useless against the blue sword. However, once he stepped into Life Cultivation realm and reached the initial stage of Life Matrix, the power of Su Ming's reversal of time could be effective against the blue sword. As the blue sword moved back and a large amount of the power of the world spread out from within it, Su Ming reached the limit of his ability to support the power of destiny. Then, he pressed his right hand against the center of his brows. Statue of the god of berserkers in Life Cultivation realm. Su Ming roared, and the statue of the god of berserkers that was 10,000 feet tall immediately manifested around him with a bang. That statue passed through Su Ming's body, clasped its right hand with its left hand, and rammed it against the blue sword. A powerful presence also erupted from the statue of the god of berserkers, as if it had stirred up the kismet of the berserkers to be added to its body and the power of the world around it. As booming sounds rang in the air, Su Ming turned around and charged forward with a pale face. He did not linger for even a moment longer. He knew the strength of the blue sword, and even if he executed destiny and his statue of the god of berserkers, he would not be able to destroy it. But he could buy himself some time. This amount of time would allow Su Ming to find another place to hide and heal his current body. As he retreated, Su Ming brought out a large number of medicinal cores and crushed them before sucking in a deep breath. All of them were sucked into his mouth to nourish his body. His flesh and blood started squirming, and he was rapidly recovering. The recommendation board continued falling, and just looking at it would make people's hearts waver. The demon army was awesome. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 776. As he swallowed a large amount of medicinal cores to restore his flesh and blood, Su Ming no longer continued moving forward. Instead, he charged towards the sky. His refuge was in death vortex in the sky. No matter how strong the blue sword was, it was still an immortal from Bright Yang region. If that was the case, then based on Su Ming's judgment, death vortex would definitely be able to suppress the blue sword. There was no time for Su Ming to think. With a firm resolution, he charged towards the vortex in the sky like a shooting star. At the instant he was several thousands of feet away from the blue sword, booming sounds came from behind him. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth. It was an injury caused by his statue of the god of berserkers being unable to continue blocking the blue sword. Su Ming knew that it was not that his statue of the god of berserkers was not strong enough, but that his level of cultivation was not enough for him to bring out the statue's full power. At that moment, he could only bring out a wisp of its power. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, Su Ming's statue of the god of berserkers did not shatter. Instead, it disappeared from the world. The blue sword let out a piercing sword whistle and sliced through the sky, turning into a long blue arc that charged towards Su Ming. Su Ming's body was rapidly recovering. His speed had already reached the limit of his cultivation base. At that moment, he sliced through the air and charged towards death vortex in the sky. As he charged forward, the distance between them grew smaller. At that moment, the blue sword that had been pulled back several thousands of feet abruptly let out a light that practically dyed the entire world blue. Under that light, Su Ming noticed, to his shock, that the power of the world within an area of several thousands of lees was being forcefully absorbed by the blue sword in an incredibly domineering manner. If it was absorbing power in an area of several dozens of lees, Su Ming would have a slim chance of survival. If it was absorbing power in an area of 100 lees, it could kill him straight away. If it was absorbing power in an area of several thousands of lees. As Su Ming's skin crawled, the blue sword's speed swiftly increased by 10 times. It was incredibly fast to begin with, and now that it had increased by 10 times, its speed could no longer be described with words. With just a flash, the blue sword shot through the distance of several thousands of feet. Even the danger Tion had brought to Su Ming in the past could not compare to this. Su Ming had a feeling that he would definitely not be able to avoid the killing sword strike before he stepped into death vortex. Even though he was already extremely close to death vortex, less than 1,000 feet away, and even felt as if he could touch it with his hand, a distance of 1,000 feet was a matter of life and death. Only a small portion of his body remained, and his mind was filled with exhaustion. His eyes were completely bloodshot, and he had never been in such a miserable state before. If it was someone else in such a state, they would have already collapsed before the blue sword could even reach them. Su Ming gritted his teeth. His expression was contorted to the point that it was almost ferocious. At the instant death closed in on him and the killing sword closed in on him, he laughed. There was an endless chill in that laughter, along with a wave of determination and madness. No one can take my life away from me. The soul in Su Ming's body started burning at that instant. It was the burning of his soul, and it was the unyieldingness and persistence in the midst of madness. As Su Ming's soul burned, a vast amount of power erupted from his body with a bang. This was an eruption of power obtained by burning his soul, and it was incredibly great. Su Ming's body was originally recovering, but as his soul burned and erupted, his body was scattered, causing his flesh and blood to distort. The intense pain of being torn apart did not overwhelm Su Ming. Instead, it made him descend into even greater madness. Almost at the instant the blue sword closed in on him, Su Ming threw a punch with his right hand at the blue sword while his soul burned. A loud bang that shook the sky and earth rose into the air at that instant. This was Su Ming's strike where he burned his soul. It was the strongest strike he could bring forth with his cultivation base once his soul was ignited. This punch surpassed Su Ming's level of cultivation and reached an even higher level. In the midst of that bang, Su Ming's right arm completely shattered and a small part of his body exploded. Only his head was left, and under the surging impact, it tumbled back 1,000 feet and flew straight into death fog. At the same time, for the first time, the blue sword let out a shrill buzz. The sword had a spirit, and Su Ming's strike had crashed straight into the sword's spirit, causing the sword to fall back 100 feet in midair before it stopped. However, once it stopped, the power of the world within a circular area of 10,000 lis tumbled backwards with a bang and charged towards the sword. In an instant, it was absorbed by the blue sword and turned into a piercing ray of blue light that chased after death vortex. It would not stop until it killed Su Ming. At the instant Su Ming's head was swept into death fog, his consciousness became muddled. This sort of injury could no longer be described as severe. It was already in the realm of death. If it was anyone else in his place, they would definitely die. The prerequisite was that this person's level of cultivation was below life cultivation realm. Once a person stepped into life cultivation realm, then while this sort of injury was in the realm of death, it was not impossible for him to recover. Life cultivation realm was the cultivation of one's own life. This was different from the immortals, but it was also similar. All immortals had nascent souls and nascent divinities. No matter how badly their bodies were injured, as long as their nascent divinities were not destroyed, they could possess someone else and be reborn, or think of a way to gather their nascent divinities together again. The berserkers could not do this, but once they stepped into life cultivation realm, even if their entire body was destroyed, as long as a piece of flesh remained, they would have endless possibilities. The prerequisite was that their souls were not destroyed. Compared to the nascent divinities of the immortals, the souls of fated kin could not possess other lives. However, as long as their souls were not destroyed, then their bodies would not be destroyed. If this was not the case for the second god of berserkers, he would not have needed to use Morning Tao Vessel to suppress his body after he was torn to shreds. His soul was too strong, and even though it had disappeared, there were still remnants of his soul left in the world. That was why, as a precaution, the change in the past had occurred. Su Ming, who had yet to step into life cultivation realm, would have definitely died with these sort of injuries. However, now that he had stepped into life cultivation realm and was in the initial stage of life matrix, he possessed this unique characteristic of the berserker's cultivation system. Even if he only had his head, as long as his soul was not destroyed, he could be reborn. However, Su Ming had burned his soul before he rushed into death fog, and it was a grievous injury to him. However, his will was incredibly strong. Even if he had burned his soul, he could still remain conscious. Besides, he had only burned his soul for an instant, which was why his core was not damaged. At that moment, Su Ming opened his mouth and sucked in a deep breath. Immediately, a large amount of aura of death charged towards his head. Once it fused into his body, Su Ming's body started showing signs of recovery once again. Muffled screeches came from behind him, An array of blue light shot through the layers of fog to chase after Su Ming. However, this was the vortex of death fog, and the blue sword came from the land of immortals and bright yang. Its speed had naturally become much slower in the vortex, and it was also suppressed. Because of that, as its speed increased and decreased, it managed to maintain a distance of 1,000-something feet between it and Su Ming. It could not catch up to him, and Su Ming could not shake it off either. However, Su Ming was like a fish in water in death fog. As he absorbed a large amount of death fog, his body started recovering rapidly. His upper body was already formed, and the outline of his legs gradually appeared. By the looks of it, before long, they would be completely formed. The feeling of his flesh and blood being regenerated was not a comfortable feeling. Instead, there was pain mixed with the numbness. However, this pain was nothing to Su Ming. He had even burned his soul before, and compared to that pain, this pain was not even 1,000th of it. However, while death region had a suppressive effect on the blue sword, Su Ming was like a fish in water. There were plenty of powerful, ferocious beasts in the water, and there were quite a number of them who were equivalent to those in life cultivation realm. In fact, there were even some who surpassed those in life cultivation realm. Some of them were divided into regions, but there were also some who loved devouring others. Overall, the reason why the death beasts in death fog could become stronger was because they were continuously devouring each other. If Su Ming had come alone, he would have been fine. As long as he was careful, he would not have attracted too much attention. After all, his presence could fuse into one with this place, and he was a life cultivation realm cultivator. He was not weak, but the blue sword was chasing after him. That sword was like a bright lamp in the night, and it did not just illuminate itself, but also Su Ming. Because of that, before Su Ming and the blue sword could move through death fog for too long, dozens of mighty pressures that surpassed Su Ming's level of cultivation descended on them with a bang. These dozens of mighty pressures were like a windstorm that swept through the area. Su Ming, who had just recovered, was immediately forced back by the impact. A glint appeared in his eyes, and once he absorbed a large amount of aura of death around him once again, he immediately charged downwards. He could sense the displeasure and warning from the numerous ferocious beasts in death region from the dozens of mighty pressures and wills. If he continued moving forward, then he would suffer a counterattack that would not be any weaker than the blue swords. Similarly, when the blue sword chased after Su Ming, it was swept away by the dozens of waves of mighty pressure. Since it came from a land of immortals and had bright yang in its blade, the impact it suffered was far greater than Su Ming's. In fact, aside from the dozens of waves of mighty pressure, there were also 3 waves of mighty pressure that pressed down on the blue sword with malicious intent. These 3 presences came from the depths of death vortex. They were very far away, but the mighty pressure spreading out from them was equivalent to that of immortals in the 3rd step. Because of that, the blue sword let out a shrill sword whistle, as if it could not withstand the pressure. In fact, its blue light had become much duller, and there was a faint aura of death surrounding it. The sword spirit within immediately roared, and in its dispirited state, the blue sword did not dare to move forward even a single step. The sword shuddered as it chased after Su Ming once again, who was fleeing downwards. Roars that seemed to be filled with crazed laughter came from the distance within death fog, as if they were incredibly happy with what they were doing. These were living creatures that were born in death fog during the ancient era. They were so strong that even the immortals were forced to activate a rune and descend upon them. It was difficult for them to move through death fog. The blue sword was not even worth mentioning in their eyes. In fact, the 3 powerful waves of mighty pressure just now might have seemed to have come from the depths of the fog, but in truth, they were far from it. Lad, you're not bad. If you don't get killed by this disgusting sword spirit that contains bright yang aura, then I'll let you train in Death Holy Land for a period of time. That's why you have to kill it. Get rid of it. Turn it into a death sword. These roars reached Su Ming's ears. He was momentarily stunned before he gritted his teeth. If the recommendation is good, then I'll personally go into battle tomorrow and help Su Ming kill the blue sword. How about it? I'll personally go into battle and kill it. To be continued. If you like this work, then please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 777. When those voices roared out, they were accompanied by malicious laughter. There was not much malice towards Su Ming within that laughter. After all, the aura of death around Su Ming was a part of death fog. However, the blue sword was different. The pressure it had to withstand was incredibly great, and the three mighty presences had crashed into it just then it almost made it unable to withstand it. Those three mighty presences were equivalent to the might of the immortals in the third step. They brought with them a savage and murderous air that forced a wisp of death aura into the blue sword, causing it to let out a sword whistle that it could not withstand. The blue sword might have become much duller at that moment, but it was still as sharp as ever. With a piercing whistle, it charged toward Su Ming. Su Ming gritted his teeth and stopped moving forward. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the fog. This was the second time he stopped while being chased by the blue sword. Almost at the instant his legs recovered and he stopped moving forward, Su Ming lifted his right hand and formed a seal. With an incredibly quick speed, he formed 99 different seals. Once those seals appeared, the blue sword closed in on Su Ming when it was less than several hundreds of feet away. A sharp presence closed in on Su Ming, and there was killing intent contained within that presence, as if it would not stop until it killed Su Ming. 9 transformations, 10 transformations, 1 voice. At the instant the blue sword was only 100 feet away from him, Su Ming let out a low growl. He swung his right hand and lifted his left hand to form a large number of different seals once again. As he merged his hands together, a strange, enchanting light appeared in his eyes. 9 transformations, transformation. Su Ming let out a low growl and connected his mind with the small snake. Suddenly, the presence of the candle dragon erupted from his body. As that presence erupted, Su Ming's body instantly started distorting, and almost the instant the blue sword closed in on him, he disappeared. What appeared before the blue sword was a gigantic candle dragon. It was Su Ming's 10 transformations art. The candle dragon could devour the stars in the world. When it opened its eyes, it could replace the sun, moon, and stars. The instant it turned into the candle dragon, the blue sword crashed into the candle dragon's body with a bang. A heaven-shaking sound that caused the death fog to churn violently reverberated in all directions. Amidst the rumbles, there were also laughter and malicious words that came from the fog. He actually transformed into the candle dragon. Not bad, little fellow. Put in more effort and kill it. This little thing has guts to dare to show its bright young presence in Death Holy Land. Even the almighties of the immortals and the even stronger sword spirits wouldn't dare to be so arrogant in Death Holy Land. Brat, if you don't kill it today, I'll kill you. Use your strength. Damn it, did you not eat? Those voices were filled with strange laughter and continued traveling out of the fog, but Su Ming did not have time to be annoyed by them. The blue sword's might was still incredibly great. The instant it touched the candle dragon's body and the booming sound spread out, the candle dragon's body crumbled. As it tumbled backwards continuously, it looked as if its entire body was about to crumble. Yet the moment it crumbled, the candle dragon opened its mouth and sucked in a deep breath towards the death fog around it. Immediately, a vast amount of death fog tumbled towards it with loud, rumbling sounds and charged into the candle dragon's mouth. Once it was sucked in madly, it started fighting against the blue sword's might. Booming sounds did not stop. As they fought against each other, only a small portion of the candle dragon that was Su Ming remained. The remaining half had already disappeared without a trace. Sharp pain filled Su Ming's heart. His eyes turned bloodshot, and even the candle dragon's eyes flew open. At the same time, a strange light appeared in his eyes, They were also filled with blood capillaries as he glared at the blue sword. The sword attack could not kill Su Ming, who was the candle dragon. As the booming sounds reverberated in the air, the death fog that was forced into the sword tumbled about, causing its color to become even duller. The sword let out a piercing howl and turned around. This time, it did not charge towards Su Ming, but charged out of the fog. It wanted to leave death fog. Only by leaving this place could it forcefully devour the power of the world around it and chase away the death aura on the sword so that it could bring out an even stronger sword's might. It already locked down on Su Ming. No matter where he was, it would be able to instantly sense him and chase after him. Yet now, it needed the span of a few breaths to absorb enough power of the world. That was why it decided to temporarily give up on Su Ming. As it charged forward, just as it was about to rush out of the fog and charge through it, the three mighty presences from the depths of the fog turned into roars within the vortex. Damn it! How could you let it run? Why didn't you kill it? You brat, you can't even kill a sword, and you're still the god of berserkers from the world below. Trash! Trash! You're a complete piece of trash. If you can't kill it, then you'll be killed by it. As the three malicious voices roared, there was not a hint of anger within them. However, since the moment Su Ming started chasing after the sword in the fog until the moment he attacked it, the three voices had continued speaking nonstop, giving off an incredibly long-winded feeling to all those who heard them. If it was any other time, Su Ming would have let it slide, but he was heavily injured at that moment, and he was already feeling annoyed. The three nagging voices made Su Ming lift the candle dragon's head and let out a low growl at the fog. Shut up. That growl tumbled about in the fog like thunder. At the instant it traveled out, the three voices came to an abrupt halt, as if they could not believe that Su Ming would actually dare to shout at them so loudly. Almost at the same time they let out that growl, half of the blue sword's body was already outside the fog vortex, and it looked as if it was about to rush out in a flash. Once it rushed out of death fog, then before long, a powerful sword might would erupt forth from the sword. Unless Su Ming did not get out of death vortex for the rest of his life, then once he went out, he would definitely be in danger. Besides, there was a high possibility that the sword would recover completely outside and become even more powerful. If it rushed into the fog once again, then unless Su Ming immersed himself in the depths of the fog, he would still be in danger. This was a chance. It could be said that this was Su Ming's only chance to kill the sword. His eyes turned crimson, causing madness to appear in the candle dragon's eyes. The instant the blue sword was about to leave the fog, the candle dragon opened its mouth wide and sucked in a sharp breath in the direction of the blue sword. The candle dragon's ability to devour could devour mountains and rivers. In fact, an adult candle dragon could devour an entire world. This sort of powerful inborn ability was incredibly terrifying. The candle dragon that Su Ming had turned into might still be a baby, but the candle dragon's blessing and the power of one world existed in his heart, causing endless possibilities for Su Ming's ability to devour to exist. At the instant it swallowed, all the death fog around the blue sword that had rushed out of the sword suddenly rolled back. It was as if an indescribably strong suction force had spread out with a bang. As the death fog tumbled backwards, it charged towards the candle dragon's gaping mouth. At the same time, some of the power of the world under the fog also surged up madly against their will. As for the blue sword, a powerful blue light erupted forth from it in an attempt to break out of the candle dragon's ability to devour it. With bloodshot eyes, Su Ming appeared on the candle dragon's head and glared at the blue sword. All his power erupted from his body, and he activated the 10 transformations divine ability, causing the candle dragon's ability to devour to become even stronger. If you want to kill me, then I'll devour you first. Su Ming roared with a ferocious look on his face. The fragment of the power of one world he had fused with his heart erupted forth swiftly as he fused with the candle dragon. The air around the blue sword immediately started shattering at that instant. With a bang, Even the air started distorting, and like lines, they charged toward the candle dragon's gaping mouth. The blue sword fought back forcefully under the suction force, wanting to break through everything to move forward. But there was no way Su Ming would let the sword escape. No matter what, he had to devour the sword. As for what would happen next, Su Ming did not have time to think about it. However, it was still better than letting the sword leave Death Vortex and absorb the power of the world. Between the past and the future is destiny. Su Ming lifted his hands. The back of his left hand was facing upwards, and the back of his right hand was facing downwards. As he swiftly clasped his hands together, everything around him instantly reversed. The blue sword shuddered and could no longer move forward. It fell backwards. The power of destiny, the candle dragon's ability to devour the world, and the fact that the sword had been corroded by death fog and had become duller due to the three powerful presences had finally caused it to start retreating. However, the sword was incredibly strong. It might have started retreating, but it only retreated 100-something feet before it immediately stopped. The sword started turning swiftly, but did not choose to rush out of the fog and join the candle dragon's devouring. Instead, as piercing blue light shone, a wave of killing intent and murderous aura erupted forth with a bang. It moved along the suction force and the reversal of time, stirring up a piercing whistle as it charged towards the candle dragon's gaping mouth. The two of them closed in on each other in an instant, and a loud bang that shook the sky and earth erupted madly within the fog. In the midst of that bang, the candle dragon devoured the blue sword, but its body also completely crumbled at that instant. As it crumbled, Su Ming shot out in a flash. This time, it was not the candle dragon who devoured the sword, but Su Ming himself. The instant he appeared, rays of blue light erupted from his body, and people could clearly see blue light swimming under his skin. That blue light was the blue sword. Intense pain rampaged through Su Ming's body, but there was a ferocious look on his face. There was also a determined look on his face. He circulated his cultivation base and started absorbing the death fog around him madly to suppress the killing sword in his body. "All right, I'll forgive your huff just now. Boy, you've got guts. How dare you devour that sword? Ha, good job. Go refine it and turn it into your enchanted vessel. Refine it into Death's sword. Darn it, if you don't die, then you can come to Death's holy land whenever you want." A shrill roar tumbled out of Su Ming's mouth, and a large amount of blood fog erupted from his body. The color of that blood fog was blue, and rays of blue light spread out from his body. Clearly, the blue sword was trying to destroy and rush out of Su Ming's body. Today is Tuesday. If all of you who voted for me yesterday can persevere for another day, then Show MO will definitely get into the top 3. Persevere, my friends. How many votes did you vote for me yesterday? Persevere for another day. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 778. The blue sword continued its destruction in Su Ming's body, but at the same time, since the sword could not come into contact with the world outside, the death aura on it became thicker. The color of the sword dimmed, and it looked as if it was distorting. However, the power of the sword was not something Su Ming could fight against. He might be using the death aura in this place to suppress it, but the degree of suppression was still not enough. Because of that, if he continued staying in this place, then before long, Su Ming had a feeling that it would be difficult for him to continue suppressing the sword. The sword would break down and rush out. I absolutely cannot let it come into contact with the world outside. Su Ming roared in his heart. Once he absorbed the death fog around him once again, he swiftly charged forward. I have to find a place to help me suppress this sword. Su Ming bled from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, making him look even more ferocious, but he could not care about anything else. If he could not completely get rid of the danger brought by the sword, then the consequences will be dire. Perhaps if this had happened to someone else, they would not have devoured the sword in such a frenzied manner. After all, not even the three gigantic wills had expected that Su Ming would devour the sword. If he had chosen to let the sword leave and become stronger outside, he would not have been in danger for the time being. He would have had other choices. He could have avoided it and not come out. He could have asked for help from the three gigantic wills, even if he had to pay a huge price to beg for protection. But Su Ming would not choose this path. He only had one choice. If they wanted to kill him, then he would kill them as well. I won't avoid it, I won't dodge it. I will face it head on. Either I die, or you die. It's just like my attitude towards the immortals. Either I die, or the immortals are destroyed. If I wake up, the sky will be dyed red. If I open my eyes, the immortals will die, and this was a chance. Su Ming did not want to let it go. He had a vague feeling that this was his only chance to get through this murderous disaster. Suppress, suppress. What place can help me suppress this sword and provide me with great protection so that I can recover and suppress it at ease? Eastern Wastelands Tower. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly, and a brilliant light shone in his eyes. Even if the blood-red light did not reach 10 million lis, Su Ming was the only person who could enter Eastern Wastelands Tower without any conditions. This tower was the supreme treasure of the Berserkers, an item left behind by the first god of Berserkers. With this tower, he had stirred up chaos in the land of immortals. There was no other place in Eastern Wastelands that was more suitable for suppressing and healing than this tower. Besides, this was the closest thing to Su Ming. As for Great Yu Imperial City, Su Ming did not choose it. He might have a slight connection with it, but he would never forget the roar he had heard coming from within Great Yu Imperial City in the depths of the sea all those years ago. Even Su Ming could sense. That Ming time as he, in time, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He sucked in another deep breath of the vast, in-depth aura around him. When his body was about to crumble, the blue light in his body seeped through it to reveal itself, and the power suppressing him was about to shatter. Su Ming took a step out of the fog without any hesitation. With it, Su Ming's body appeared in the world. He did not stop for even a single moment. He turned into a long blue arc and charged into the distance with a loud whistle. Eastern Wastelands Tower was located at the center of Eastern Wastelands. It was not too far away from this place. Su Ming might not know the details and had never been there before, but Eastern Wastelands Tower had appeared because of him, and the vague feeling he had in his heart was the best guide. As he charged forward, the blue light spreading out of his body became stronger. After a moment, he looked as if he was completely covered in blue. Blood continued gushing out of his body, and the blue light in his body circulated even more intensely. Banging sounds continued echoing in the air, but Su Ming's eyes were filled with determination and resolution. As he continued suppressing the sword, his speed increased. Before long, a piercing blood-red light that was several hundreds of lis in size appeared before him. At the center of that blood-red light was a tower with 99 floors. That tower exuded an endless amount of ancient air. It stood erect on the ground and was incredibly eye-catching. Under that blood-red light, the tower was dyed red. Not only did it look terrifying, there was also a supreme pressure that descended on Su Ming at the instant he stepped into the blood-red light. The strength of that pressure caused the blue sword in Su Ming's body to shudder with a bang, but Su Ming did not suffer too much from that pressure. His spirits were lifted, and he became even faster. This was Eastern Wastelands Tower. It was the Eastern Wastelands Tower that made the immortals descend into madness and slaughter each other, all for the sake of stepping into it. The first god of Berserkers lies Shan Shio's epiphany, and there were even clues to the Berserkers' supreme treasure, the Baron Cauldron, at the top of the tower. As Su Ming closed in, the pressure from Eastern Wastelands Tower became even stronger. The tower was incredibly tall, so it naturally formed an oppressive feeling that descended on the hearts of all those who saw it. As the blue sword trembled, it started struggling madly, as if it wanted to rush out of Su Ming's body, as if it did not want to get close to Eastern Wastelands Tower. As it struggled, Su Ming's body fell into chaos. His flesh and blood crumbled, his bones shattered, and the tip of the sword pierced out of his chest. At the instant it was about to rush out, Su Ming lifted his left hand and pressed it against the tip of the sword in his chest. He did not care that his hand was covered in blood and pushed the tip of the sword into his body once again. "Go back," Su Ming panted harshly. His face was pale, but the ferociousness and madness on his face was enough to make all those who saw it feel apprehensive. Almost at the instant Su Ming closed in on Eastern Wasteland's tower, the door at the bottom of the tower slowly opened on its own. It was as if a windstorm had appeared out of nowhere and swept up the entire area around the tower, turning into a gigantic vortex that was connected to the sky and earth. As that vortex rotated with loud, rumbling sounds, it shook the sky and earth. It was as if it had been waiting for Su Ming's arrival, or else it would not have opened the door on its own once he got closer. It was as if it had been waiting for Su Ming for a long time, and at this moment, he had finally arrived. At the instant the door to Eastern Wasteland's tower opened, blue light erupted from Su Ming's body. He coughed up blood, and his legs crumbled under that blue light. His body continued shattering, but he turned into a long arc that was a mixture of blood and blue that charged towards the door. The blue sword let out a piercing screech, and there was an indescribable terror in that screech, as if the door to Eastern Wasteland's tower was a life and death battle to it. When he was 100 feet away from the door to Eastern Wasteland's tower, Su Ming's legless body crumbled once again. The tip of a blue sword crawled out of his right shoulder, and with a piercing sword whistle, it looked as if it wanted to rush out, but Su Ming lifted his left hand from his chest. Once he seized it, he pushed it back into his body. Su Ming moved, and at the instant he was only 50 feet away from the open door to Eastern Wasteland's tower. Half of his body exploded, and his flesh and blood spilled everywhere. As the blue sword struggled madly, a boy appeared faintly on it. That boy was covered in blue light, and at the instant Su Ming saw him, a glint appeared in his eyes. He remembered the small black humanoid that had disappeared after he fought against Tion's clone in the past. Besides their color, that small black humanoid was incredibly similar to the boy. Once the small blue boy appeared, he surrounded the blue sword and was about to rush out of Su Ming's shattered body, but Su Ming clamped down on it with his left hand. With one charge, he was already less than 20 feet away from the door to Eastern Wasteland's tower, and he would be able to step inside in the span of a breath. Endless terror and despair appeared in the small blue humanoid's eyes. It let out a piercing screech, and with a flash of the sword, Su Ming's left arm shattered with a bang. Even half of his head was reduced to ashes. At that moment, the blue sword and the small blue boy rushed out once Su Ming's left arm was destroyed, but at the instant they rushed out, Su Ming's right hand swiftly seized the sword's hilt. "You can't escape." Su Ming's dark voice reverberated in the air. At that moment, only a small part of his body and his right arm remained. At the instant his right arm seized the blue sword, it was immediately torn to pieces, but even though it had shattered, he still managed to grab hold of the blue sword, causing it to be unable to escape during that instant. It was during that instant that Su Ming rushed into the wide, open door to Eastern Wasteland's tower, and he also dragged the blue sword into Eastern Wasteland's tower the instant the boy's right arm shattered while the sword spirit screamed and fell into despair. Su Ming's dark laughter reverberated in the air. There was madness within that laughter, along with a resolve that said either the boy would die or he would. In the midst of the boy's despairing roars, a loud bang reverberated in the sky and shook the entire world of berserkers, and the door to Eastern Wasteland's tower slammed shut. At the instant it closed, the tip of a blue sword wanted to rush out as if it had gone mad. But Su Ming, who had lost his arms and legs, still had teeth. At the instant the tip of the sword was about to rush out, Su Ming bit down on the blade, and the crazed look in his eyes caused the sword's spirit to tremble. As if he was going to die with the sword, he held it back. The door to Eastern Wasteland's tower slammed shut. "Either you die or I die." At the same time the door closed, Su Ming's dark voice reverberated in the air. The blood-red light from Eastern Wasteland's tower continued spreading through the area at that instant, dyeing the world in its area red, causing everything in the place to be dyed red. It did not matter whether it was the trees, the flowers, the earth, or the wind that blew towards them. All of them were dyed red, and there was a bloody stench to them. This was Eastern Wasteland's tower. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, a year went by. During this year, the immortals did not descend again. The vortex in the sky also slowly disappeared, and the blue sky appeared once again. White clouds could be seen everywhere, and everything seemed to have returned to how it was. However, a drastic change had happened on the ground. The berserkers in Eastern Wastelands had started gathering and searching for Su Ming under the organization of several powerful forces of power. They were gathering because they were carrying out Su Ming's will and wanted to kill all the immortals in the land of berserkers. Even if Su Ming had disappeared for a year, they still continued with their search. They were searching for Su Ming. They were searching for Su Ming and the god of berserkers. Recommendation tickets. I love you guys so much. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 779. There is a chain of mountains located far away from where Evil Spirit Sect was located. At that moment, a middle-aged man with a protruding mouth and a chin like a monkey's was carefully walking out of the forest at the foot of the mountain range. As he moved forward, he observed his surroundings cautiously, as if he would immediately run away at the slightest hint of fear. Naturally, that person was Qian. His face was swollen, and he looked incredibly pathetic. His robes were also torn, as if he had been tortured. He had no idea what sort of devastation he had gone through. But at that moment, there was panic on his nervous face as he moved forward carefully. There were two long arcs charging through the sky about several thousands of feet away from him. There were two berserkers in those two long arcs. One of them seemed to be in the middle stage of the awakening realm, and the other was in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm. They were probably just passing by, because the long arcs did not stop for even a single moment and continued charging forward. Over the past few days, as the berserkers rose to power in Eastern Wastelands, long arcs like this would frequently appear in many places. They were either rushing forward, gathering together, or searching for something. The immortals had closed their doors, causing very few immortals to appear in Eastern Wastelands. However, there were still some scattered immortals who would occasionally be discovered by the berserkers. Usually, once the berserkers found these immortals, they would kill them. At the instant Qian Shun saw the two long arcs in the sky, his eyes went wide. If he had fallen to the ground and pretended to be dead, or quickly crouched down and hid in the bushes, then perhaps he would not have been discovered. After all, the two long arcs that belonged to the berserkers were just passing by, and they were not slow either. However, he seemed to have been frightened. Perhaps it was because the experiences he had gone through over the past few days had made him feel like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. At the instant he saw the two long arcs, he let out a shrill scream and jumped up to run towards the forest he had just come out from. The two long arcs in the sky had originally passed by the spot where Qian Shun was and did not notice his existence. But when Qian Shun let out a piercing scream of pain, the two long arcs came to an abrupt halt. The eyes of the two young berserkers instantly sparkled, and they looked towards the ground. Their gazes pierced through the leaves in the forest and saw Qian Shun running away. Immortals! The two of them cast each other a glance and immediately noticed that there was something off about Qian Shun. The ripples of power and presence spreading out from Qian Shun's body gave off a faint feeling that he was an immortal. That presence had not spread out from Qian Shun's body just then, but as he ran, it spread out in a large area, as if he could not control it. The two berserkers immediately changed their direction and charged towards Qian Shun, who was still running in the forest. Cold sweat broke out on Qian Shun's forehead. That panicked look on his face made him look as if he was about to die of fright at any moment. As he trembled, he quickly ran, but every single time he increased his speed, he would immediately trip over the weeds in the forest, causing the two berserkers to close in on him. At the instant, they were less than 100 feet away from Qian. A cold snort suddenly rang out from within the forest, and an extremely powerful aura appeared along with it. That aura swept through the world, causing the world to lose its color in an instant. It transformed into a mighty pressure that came crashing down. That mighty pressure was incredibly domineering, and it exuded the presence of a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. It was enough to make the hearts of all those who sensed it tremble. Puny immortals, how dare you barge into my isolation grounds? As the old voice echoed in the air, the expressions of the two berserkers who were chasing after Qian immediately changed. The two of them stopped simultaneously, and with respect and zealousness in their eyes, they wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the forest. Almost at the instant the two of them bowed to the forest, an old man with a head full of white hair and dressed in a white robe walked out from the depths of the forest, looking as if he was afraid that others would not be able to see him. The old man's face was flushed red, and as he appeared, the presence coming from his body became stronger. It shook the sky and earth, causing distortions to appear in the air around him. As Qian trembled, he seemed to be unable to continue fleeing under that mighty pressure. He was stunned and stared blankly at the old man who was walking towards him. There was an awe-inspiring look on the old man's face. Once he got closer, his gaze was like lightning. He cast Qian a glance, then lifted his right hand and pointed at Qian through the air. That action was done in a relaxed manner, and there was not a hint of the presence of fire. Not even a single ripple of power could be sensed from it. It looked as if he had just casually pointed at Qian. Even if one of the two berserkers had already reached the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm, he would not be able to see anything from that one finger. To them, there was not a single hint of divine ability from that one finger. However, Qian, who had been pointed at 100-something feet away, let out an incredibly shrill scream of pain. As his body trembled, he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. He clutched his throat, and his face instantly turned purple. He fell to the ground, twitching a few times before he stopped moving. This sudden scene caused the hearts of the two berserkers to tremble. Their hearts immediately started racing, and shock as well as fanaticism appeared in their gazes as they looked towards the old man. To them, even if the dead immortal did not have a high level of cultivation, the 1 point from the senior in their tribe definitely contained the changes in the world, or else it would be impossible for him to kill someone without a trace, without a single ripple of power. The suffocating pressure spreading out from the old man's body and the finger that contained the changes in the world were all enough to make the two berserkers' expressions turn into fanaticism. I am White Phoenix Tribe's Apu. Greetings, Senior. I am White Phoenix Tribe's Lin Duo. Greetings, Senior. The two berserkers had respectful expressions on their faces as they bowed towards the old man. I see. So you're juniors from White Phoenix Tribe. Not bad. Both of you are young, but your levels of cultivation are pretty good. The old man stroked his beard, and a smile appeared on his face as he nodded towards the two. Senior, you know of White Phoenix Tribe. Could it be that you're an old friend of ours? The berserker in the bone sacrifice realm immediately wrapped his fist in his palm and asked. His expression became even more respectful. I remember going to White Phoenix Tribe many years ago. At that time, your elder was said to be the second elder of White Phoenix Tribe. A nostalgic look appeared on the old man's face, and he looked very sentimental. His words immediately caused the two berserkers to suck in a sharp breath. They stared at the old man with a dumbfounded expression, and a huge storm raged in their hearts. If anyone else had said these words, they would definitely not have believed them. However, these words were spoken by this old monster with a great level of cultivation. His monstrous presence made it clear that he was clearly a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker tribe. Besides, that 1 point of his head definitely contained the changes in the world, which made the two of them choose to believe him. My tribe's second elder. That was 5,000-something years ago. The berserker in the Transcendence realm's voice trembled slightly, and his expression was filled with fanaticism. Let's not talk about what happened in the past. I've been in isolation here for far too long. By the way, why did the two of you appear here while chasing after that immortal? The old man shook his head, looking as if he did not want to remember the past. Senior, the two of us were ordered to gather outside Evil Spirit Sect and monitor it with the people from the other tribes. When we passed by this place, we saw that immortal acting suspiciously, and we wanted to kill him. The two berserkers immediately answered without holding anything back. Monitor Evil Spirit Sect? The old man cast the two berserkers a glance. Senior, you've been in isolation here for many years. You must not know about the things that have happened in the land of berserkers recently. The god of berserkers appeared a year ago and made all the berserkers' blood burn, allowing us to rise to power. We will definitely chase away all the immortals in the land of berserkers. Something like that actually happened. The old man immediately became stern. Is what the two of you said true? This is absolutely true. We would not dare lie to you, Senior. The two berserkers quickly answered. A glint appeared in the old man's eyes. In silence, he placed his hands behind his back and took a few steps back and forth. He looked as if he was deep in thought, and after a moment, he came to a stop and lifted his head to cast the two berserkers a glance. This matter is too important. I can't continue my isolation either. I'll have to go and confirm this with some of my old friends. How about this? The two of you are not allowed to tell anyone about me. Not even your elder, the old man said slowly. The two berserkers immediately lowered their heads and voiced their obedience. Also, I've been in isolation for a long time and haven't come out for many years. I'm not too clear about the changes in this world. How about this? Both of you, bring out all the stone coins you have as collateral. If what you said is true, then I will go to White Phoenix Tribe and return all your wealth to you. If you dare lie to me. The old man said flatly with his hands behind his back. The two berserkers were momentarily stunned and puzzled, but once they remembered the old man's level of cultivation, they brought out their storage bags and brought out all the stone coins they had before respectfully placing them on the ground before the old man. The old man swung his arm, and the sparkling spirit stones immediately disappeared without a trace. He nodded with a calm expression on his face. All right, you can go now. I'll also go and verify the truth of what you said. The two berserkers had slightly strange expressions on their faces, but they did not dare say anything. Once they wrapped their fists in their palms, they quickly turned into long arcs and left. The two of them looked at each other in midair, and both of them felt that there was one thing that the old man from the Central Tribe had said that was very true. The higher a person's level of cultivation was, the stranger their temperament would be. Once the two berserkers left, the old man no longer gave off the presence of an elite. His eyes sparkled as he brought out the spirit stones and took a bite out of them with a wide grin on his face. He looked incredibly pleased with himself. As for Qian Shun, who had spat out a mouthful of blood and appeared to be dead, he slowly crawled to his feet and stared at the old man. This was not the first time he had done something like this. In fact, this was the 10th time he had done this over the past year. Ever since he had gone to Evil Spirit Sect and coincidentally ran into this old man and was robbed by him, his world had changed from then on. Grandpa Crane, when are we going to Evil Spirit Sect? Qian Shun put on a long face, but he still forced himself to put on an obsequious look. What's the hurry? Once we've gathered 100,000 spirit stones, I'll let you go to Evil Spirit Sect. Just wait a little longer. Another fat sheep has come. Little Chun, we have business. The old man's spirits lifted, and he looked into the distance. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.